You're good?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay. Good to go, Angie. Thank you. Commissioners, ready? Welcome, everyone, to the Cache County Planning Commission meeting for July 7th. We appreciate you coming out tonight and hope you'll learn a little bit about your local government as part of this process. So we begin our meetings with opening remarks and the pledge, and tonight Lane Parker will be giving those for us.
I'd like to make my opening remarks in the form of a prayer. Our Father in heaven, we're grateful for the opportunity we have to be in this commission meeting this evening, and pray that thy guidance and direction might be upon us, that as we discuss the items that are on this agenda, that we might be mindful of the rights and privileges of the members of this community, and be willing to look at those reasonably and understand how they affect not just the individual but the public at large. And we're grateful for this opportunity to live in this beautiful valley and the privileges that we have in this nation that allow us the freedoms to have these kind of discussions, and pray that we would all be mindful again of the rights and privileges of those around us and how we're able to retain those rights and privileges. Pray that we might have more moisture that would benefit our crops and lands around us to be able to get through this dry and droughted situation at this time. And we pray for these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. Please stand and join me in pledging allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thanks so much, Commissioner Parker. Appreciate it. Has everyone had a chance to review the agenda this evening? Are there any changes to the agenda from staff recommended?
No changes from staff.
Any questions from commissioners? If none, without objection, we'll approve tonight's agenda. And then we have the item of approval of the minutes from our June 2nd meeting. Hopefully everyone's had a chance to look at those. Anybody see any changes needed? Anything like that? Anything from staff?
There's just this number 1 at the top of this page I'll get rid of, but yeah.
Okay. Sounds like minor editorial change there. Otherwise, if they're without objection, we'll approve the minutes from our June 2nd meeting. So we have a number of items on our agenda tonight. Looks like 10 plus. We have some administrative items and some legislative items, so it should be a fun evening. Our first item is a consent item. Consent items come before us when a project is proposed and it meets all the requirements and conditions. And so typically we don't have to go into much detailed discussion, but is there anyone here tonight with the Stewart Minor subdivision who needs to make a public comment or anything like that for that item? Okay, seeing none, commissioners, I'd take a motion to approve the consent item.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the consent item agenda, the Stewart Minor subdivision.
I'll second that.
Just to
With all of...
thank you. To clarify with
I
the
didn't
6
get
conditions
the
and
6
one
conditions.
conclusion.
And one conclusion.
Okay.
I'll take that
Is that
amendment.
okay with you, Brady, too, on the second? So we have a motion to approve the consent item and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so the Stewart Minor subdivision is approved. So for our regular action items, the first one we have coming up is a discussion on the consideration of a request by the countywide planner to schedule a special meeting. So who's taking that for us?
That is me.
Hi, Lauren.
Hi, long time no see, everyone.
Go ahead and
Happy to-
introduce yourself for those who don't know.
Yeah, Lauren Ryan, countywide planner with Cache County. So I am here this evening to request a additional meeting in July. The meeting would be we're getting really close with wrapping up the general plan. And so this meeting would be the only item on the agenda. No action taken, but it would be a workshop on the general plan to kind of prepare the planning commission with that document. So at the next meeting, you feel like you've had a chance to really look it over, get questions answered. So then the following meeting that we take it to the planning commission, that would have been when we go through the formal process of noticing and everything, and then you would take action on it at that second meeting. So the request this evening is to host a meeting either on July 21st or July 28th. Like I said, that would be a workshop, only item on the agenda, and just a chance for myself and our consultants to present the general plan to you all and be able to answer any questions at that meeting.
Of day?
Regular time, 5:30, or 5, whatever works best for the planning commission, but I believe we would just need to, Chris, would we need to stick probably with the same time, or I guess it'd be open, yeah.
It's more about what would work for getting everybody together to have a good discussion.
I will not be in the valley on the 21st.
I will not
The
either.
28th would work for me.
28th would be better.
Better for me.
Okay, 28th?
The 4th Thursday, or
Thursday the 4th, which is that?
The-
28th is actually, 28th to 21st are the days, so.
Yep.
Yeah, the
Oh, I'm
regular
looking for a
planning
different
commission.
night, okay.
So Thursday,
Easy now.
Okay. All right.
So it sounds like we're narrowing in on the 28th. The commissioners, how do you feel about the 5:30 meeting time? Is that okay?
This was me, yeah, I'm good.
Well, you said,
How long
yeah.
will the meeting? Same as.
Well, yeah. I'd plan to have the materials to you all a week in advance to give you time to look it over, and then a presentation, either by myself or the consultants we've been working with, and then time for you to answer questions. So depends on how many questions you have, anything that comes up, but
I would estimate 2 to 3 hours.
That's great.
I'm trying to give you time to talk about it and ask those questions you might have and really address the issue. Again, you'll have some discussion before that meeting if it works for the 28th. And then that meeting on, are we shooting for the first Thursday, August?
yeah, if we host it if the 28th, then that first meeting in August would be the actual time for
Oh, okay.
a vote for.
And keep in mind, this
No.
has been through the steering committee, and some of your fellow commissioners are on that committee. Jason Watterson, Chris Sands. Nolan Gunnell was a commissioner and he jumped ship, decided to be a council member. But he's also been a part of those meetings. So you've got some good voices who are well versed with this information. We're hoping that there aren't substantive issues, but it's important to review it as a commission to make sure there's issues.
So, should we do the usual meeting time at 5:30, or is earlier better?
Fine with me.
Okay, so 5:30? Sounds good. I don't think we need to take a vote or anything in that regard. We just need to,
It would help just because the state dictates that we have a calendar that's set that we follow. So it may be helpful just for the point of process to vote.
Mr. Chairman,
Chair.
I'd move that we have a joint meeting with the countywide planner on the 28th of July at 5:30 at this place. And I think we'll have steak that night before.
Steak, you said? Okay. Noted in the,
Stay invited.
Hey, whatever you do here, you do in the council too.
oh.
You ready?
What? Uh-oh.
We'll reach out to extension and see if that.
Yeah.
okay, we did have a motion and a second from Jason. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Great.
Lauren.
Thank you.
All right, the next item on our agenda is a public hearing coming up on the William Cody Pitcher rezone. So first, we'll start with a staff report on that item before we open the public hearing.
Yes, so this is a request to rezone 16.13 acres from the A10 agricultural zone to the rural 5, RU5 zone. The rezone would allow the parcel to be legally divided into a maximum of 3 separate lots as part of the subdivision process. Staff has identified some general information to help the planning commission come to a recommendation. It is a legal parcel. We have the context map, which kind of shows the surrounding character in the staff report. I can bring that up here as well. But the immediately adjacent parcels with the home, there's two, and they have an average size of 8.8 acres. When we extend that buffer to a quarter mile, the average lot size with a home on 3 parcels is 8.4. And then finally, when we go to half a mile buffer, there's 8 total parcels with a home and 37.5 acre average. So there's that map. There are a total of 24 parcels without a home within that half-mile buffer and an average lot size of 40.9 acres. So the adjacent uses are primarily agricultural with a few single-family dwellings. There is an approved 4-lot subdivision, the 7200 North, immediately south of the subject property, but the plat has been recorded, but there has been no building permits issued as of yet. The property is within Amalgatown's future annexation area. However, since it was not immediately contiguous to the town boundary, a letter from the city was not required, but they were notified as part of our noticing process. Staff has not received any comments from Amalga regarding this request. Amalga is about 2.4 miles away, so it's not immediately adjacent. If I bring this out, you should be able to see the boundary of Amalga here, and then our subject property is right about here where my mouse is. You can see it up there, it's a little difficult. But yeah, it's about 2.4 miles east of the property. The nearest RU5 zone is about 2.6 miles on the west side of Newton. You may remember this was recently approved as the Cutler Valley rezone. It was a total of 65 acres. And it is currently going through the subdivision process. So access to the property is from 4800 West, which is a county road. It's classified as a minor collector. Provides access to agricultural fields, farms, residential uses, and generally serves to provide through access from surrounding cities to state routes 218 and 23. 23 here to the west, and then 218 to the south, further south than that. The road consists of a 20-foot wide paved surface, and the structural condition is in fair condition, but it is substandard as to the major local road standards for gravel shoulders and clear zones. If a rezone were approved, the applicant has indicated that they would take access to any of the two new lots from this private road, the 7400 North. They did provide a letter from the property owner, which I included as attachment B, just confirming that access would be permitted across their property. Notices were sent, posted online and in 3 public places, and to the residents and property owners within 300 feet and Amalgatown, but we did not receive any written responses regarding this request. Staff has reviewed it, but has not made a recommendation either for approval or denial, but has provided language as part of the staff report to guide you in coming to a recommendation to forward to County Council. And with that concludes staff's report.
Thank you, Angie. Any questions for staff, commissioners?
Just regarding the, we have a letter of access there. Is that our normal practice, or do we require a dedicated easement or right of way to?
Yeah, that would be part of the subdivision process, and that
Part
will
of
be
the
included. This was just an indication that they understood what might be required. We've started having pre-application meetings with the applicants, just so they're not shell-shocked by any huge road improvements or anything. And so that was part of it, and just to provide us with that information and for you to consider, they gave that letter to us.
Any other questions? Commissioners, take a motion to open the public hearing.
So moved.
Do we have a second? So we have a motion and second to open the public hearing on the William Cody Pitcher rezone. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we'll open the public hearing. Is the applicant or proponent here tonight? Come on up and, if you'd like, it's not a requirement, but you're welcome to give us any feedback you'd like or to the commissioners, and just start with your name, please.
I'm William Cody Pitcher, and like she said, I just wanted to rezone that so that I could just build out there and then leave the rest. My plan was just to leave the rest in agriculture, so.
I think his plan was to put a couple of lots here and then just keep
Yeah,
this irrigated
save
field open
the whole
as an
big partial is to leave irrigated and.
Okay,
Angie, would you point again? I was looking in the
Yeah,
direction.
so the lot, access to the buildable lots would be in this area, and then he would maintain this as an ag remainder, the irrigated field to continue working.
So you would come in on the north side onto that road and then access from there. Then there would be a lane that would go in.
Correct. Yeah, because if you'll notice, the existing improvements on the property are fairly close to the property line, and there's not a lot of frontage right here before the irrigation line and then the next property. So, yeah, that was determined to probably be the best access to any future lots.
great. Any other questions for Mr. Pitcher? Okay, thank you. Is there anyone who would like to make a public comment on this item tonight? Seeing none?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we close the public hearing.
I'll second that.
So we have a motion and second to close the public hearing on the William Cody Pitcher rezone. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so we've closed the public hearing. What would you like to do on this one, commissioners? We do have recommendations from staff, depending on whether or not we approve or deny the item. So just refer to that if you'd like to make motion.
In my mind, typically, probably like to see it a little closer to an actual municipality. But the fact that we had in here a couple months ago, a neighbor property that we approved a 4-lot, 5-acre, or RU5 there just to the south of it. And then the lane south of that, there's 4 or 5 homes there. I think it's,
Cluster development in
I think it's compatible with the location, or compatible zoning for the area. So as such, I'm in favor.
Just a point of clarification, Commissioner, that subdivision to the south is still zoned A10.
That is A10.
It is?
Yeah. The 7200 north, the nearest RU5 zone was the one west of Newton.
South of that?
West of the subject property and west of Newton. So. But this.
How about on 7,000 north if you'll keep going?
So that's,
South of this project.
there's.
Right there, what are those
Legacy
lots?
Minor.
Yeah, what are
It's
those?
also a A10. There, we did a
Is that a 1970
subdivision
lot?
amendment. Yeah, it was an older one that allowed
Okay.
for more lots.
I agree with your point. In
It's
the
still
context
compatible,
there,
yeah.
yes. A couple more lots is more compatible than certainly a larger subdivision. Other thoughts?
Access to services, I mean, we do have the issue of coming off onto the private road, but we have good access for services there, so, and we're already providing that, from the county, so.
Other thoughts?
I'm fine with that.
I'm fine with it.
Who would like to make a motion then?
I'll go ahead and make a motion. Mr. Chairman, I'd move that we approve, or that we recommend approval of the William Cody Pitcher rezone to the county council based on the one conclusion and one conclusion, basically. that we recommend approval of this RU5.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
So a motion and a second to recommend approval to the county council for the William Cody Pitcher rezone. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Pitcher. So moving on to the next item, it's a public hearing for the Martin Bench rezone. And we'll begin that item with a report from staff.
Yes, so this is a rezone request to change 34.06 acres from the A10 zone to the RU5. This rezone may allow the parcel to be legally divided into maximum of 6 separate lots. However, due to the presence of some non-developable sensitive areas, steep slopes specifically, the maximum number of buildable lots would likely be limited to 4 or 5 at the most. The applicant's stated intention is to create a 3-lot subdivision for family members, which due to the presence of the sensitive areas on the property, they were not able to meet the minimum net developable acreage required in the A10, which is why they're requesting the rezone to the RU5. As far as surrounding context, they are close to the Mendon city boundary. Sorry, let me... There's the motion sickness. Okay, so here's that surrounding context. There's one home immediately, or one parcel immediately adjacent with a home on it, with an average size of 20 acres. When we expand that buffer to the orange, peach color quarter mile, there are 6 parcels with a home and 11.1 acre average. That quarter mile also extends into Mendon City, where there are 3 parcels with a home and 8.9 acre average. When we extend it to half a mile, there are 7 parcels in unincorporated county with a home that have 9.9 acre average lot size, and then in Mendon City, there's 5 parcels and 6.7 average. The adjacent uses are primarily agriculture, a few single-family homes, and then, as I mentioned, the Mendon city boundary. So here's our subject property is the green here. So actually, at its closest point, it encroaches into a county subdivision here. But if you just pull a straight line from the corner to Mendon boundary, it's about 0.15 miles to the subject property. As I mentioned, there are a number of sensitive areas on this property which are an obstacle for development. I've attached that to your staff report as attachment B, but for the audience here, let me turn those on. As you can see, they include steep slopes, which are in the red, and that's over 30% grade. Moderate slopes, which are 20 to 30%, are represented in the yellow. They also have a portion of a source water protection area on their property, so they would not be able to develop or have septic in this area, but could build and put septic on the southern half of the property. The property is located in Mendon City's annexation area, and the applicant did have discussions with the city and provided you that letter, attachment C, from the city, which states that after discussion by the council, city council there, they had no objection to the rezone request. Access to the property, it is a landlocked property, so frontage is going to be an issue, as well as access. The applicant is proposing, as part of a subdivision process, that access would be provided through another property that they own to the north here. So they would take access off of 1000 South into the adjacent property through this existing subdivision. I would just also mention their nearest RU5 zone is east of the subject property, about 6 miles away on the west side of Logan. It was approved in 2012 but has never been fully developed to that RU5 standard. Basic review, as I mentioned, it does come off, it is a landlocked property, so there's no frontage on a public or private road. Current access to the property is via a number of different easements for private roads. So they have, I think, agricultural easements from the 6800 West, which is a private road, and then across the southern boundary of that subdivision onto their property. However, the legality of the access and ownership of the private roads is unclear, and the fact that part of 6800 West has been annexed into Mendon, so it's just a lot going on right there, just to say. But again, they would propose access through their other property that they own in the case that the rezone was approved and they went forward with the subdivision. So 1000 South is an existing county facility that provides access from Minden City to forest recreation areas, ag uses, and a few single-family homes. It's classified as a minor local. The portion of 1000 South along where the subject property is, so above here, consists of a 20-foot wide substandard gravel road. The remainder of the road going east into Mendon ranges from 18 to 20 feet in width, but a full review of the Mendon City portion of the road was not conducted. But the county engineer has determined it is substandard compared to county standards for a minor local road. Again, public notice was posted and sent out to all property owners within 300 feet. Typo on that, to Mendon, but I have not received any written responses. Again, as with the William Cody Pitcher rezone, staff has not made a recommendation, but has drafted a couple of options for you as you go through the public hearing process and make your determination. And that concludes staff's report.
Angie, on the source protection zone,
Yeah.
that just is going to dictate where septic systems can be.
Correct.
It doesn't take away from density like the 30% slopes will. Yeah.
Yeah, it just prohibits them.
It could be up to 5 lots, it may be less than that once,
Once you take out all of that
Yeah.
sensitive areas.
okay.
And could they build a shed in those sensitive, on that protected area?
As long as there wasn't any bathroom facilities in there that required a septic. Yeah, the limiting restriction on that is septic.
Any other questions for staff, commissioners?
So I do have one, and I know you mentioned it, and I know this isn't part of our tonight's discussion, but just out of curiosity anyway. If we were to approve this, I have a serious concern with the roads. And so what would our requirements be, even if they do what they call a private road? I mean, we've brought this up before, that there's 500 foot or have been 500 foot deals or what have you. What requirements are they gonna be up against to access this property as far as road?
Matt, did you want to take that? It would just be the private road standards, which would allow a gravel road up to 5 homes. Anything over that would have to be paved. But yeah, they would have to meet all the requirements of the road manual, fire district for turnarounds and everything.
So where it's private, they would not have to pave it,
As long as there were 5 or less homes.
and the county will not do any maintenance on it.
Correct.
The roads leading to the property,
That will also.
they'll have to be upgraded.
Yes.
Yeah.
And will they have to be paved, or?
Yeah, all public roads require pavement.
So could you touch base one more time? Where does the end of pavement end, if you didn't already address that?
Yeah, so at the portion where it's kind of the parallel frontage of the subject property, it's gravel. I believe the pavement stops around this private road, if I remember correctly. So yeah, just right at the Mendon City boundary.
So they would be required to pave that road entirely up to where the private road broke off to go over.
Yeah, and possibly the full frontage. I think we still have to figure out the processing, if this would require a subdivision amendment. But yeah, they definitely, at least from the end of the pavement to their access at a minimum, would have to have a pavement.
Yep, Professor Phillips here to address this. This is good.
Matt Phillips, County Engineer. To answer your question, the way the code reads is it says along your frontage. this current development has no frontage on that county road, so it puts us in a predicament where we have to analyze the access to that, and we start, but because we're already providing services to that other one, currently this property would have no frontage, so they wouldn't be required to pave that.
They would not.
No, the other option that we would have is when they came in for their subdivision, we could deny the subdivision because the roads are substandard, but because that burden doesn't fall on them to improve it along their portion of the property, we could just say, until the roads are improved and they meet county standards, you cannot develop. So.
Is there not any kind of trigger that adding 5 more homes on that road will get it above a threshold that would require paving it, whether it's frontage or not?
It's already required to be paving, but currently we just don't, we get into a spot there where the code talks about your frontage and access to it, and since we're already providing access and we're already doing some kind of snow removal at the houses that are already past that, it gets very hard to require that of the development, so.
Okay. Thank you. Other questions for now? Okay. Would make sense to open the public hearing with a motion.
I'll make a motion, we open a public hearing.
A second.
Martin Bench.
So we have a motion and a second to open the public hearing for the Martin Bench rezone. Any further discussion, commissioners? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so we've opened the public hearing on the Martin Bench rezone. Is the proponent or applicant here? I am. Come on up. Feel free to state your name for us, and then if you'd like to have any responses to any of the questions or comments that have been raised so far, be great. And then any other questions you have.
All right, Chad Martin is my name. I'm the owner of the property. As far as what you've asked, you're talking about, I think sounds like one of the main hiccups you might have on this is the road. Just so you know, I think Nolan and I think Mike might also help me out on this, but Minden City has got the funds to pave that road. They're going to pave from where Angie said at the bottom. It'll go up past my place. So if you follow her cursor, keeps going up, it'll go up a little bit. Right there, it's going to turn and go into that field. And then they're going to create a parking lot for the Deep Canyon Trailhead. So that's already approved, that's already done, that's already a go. They've got the funding and everything.
Can I clarify?
Please do, yeah, if you can help me out.
I know the funding's specific to the trailhead, it's not to the road.
Oh,
So I need to make that clarifying point. There was a request, but the funds that were
Approved?
were appropriated and were approved do not apply to the road. They didn't qualify, the road didn't qualify.
oh, it didn't.
So now there may be funds that Mendon may pursue, but that is not currently on track unless there's something else someone else knows about.
That's a point I brought up on that, because if we were approving the trailhead, Mr. Martin came to us last year about the pitting of the road and the washboarding, and so I asked, now, ARPA funds are supposed to go to the trailhead for the parking, but I was like, okay, have we solved the issue of the road? Because if we're gonna create a parking, they will come, and all we're gonna do is inundate that road again. So I have not heard an answer, so I agree with Chris there, Chad, is I haven't heard if there has been any. I've heard that they talked about paving it, but I don't know where Mendon or where we're at on the paving.
I don't think it's been resolved, but Tim might have some updates.
Just wanted to point out the process is to go through a conditional use permit application to apply funds to the overall project. And so in addition to ARPA funds and some state York funding, Utah Outdoor Recreation, there's also some RAPS funding that's been secured for this project. And so some of the final details need to be established as in terms of what grant funding could apply to which portion of the project, but it will all go through a design and a conditional use process that will come to the Planning Commission.
It may just be for the parking area, though.
I believe the RAPS funding was intended for more than that, but we need to look at those details.
Just to clarify on that, so this, it's a separate development there, but just going forward a little bit, it appears to me that Minden City or whoever's doing that development would be required to improve the road up to that location, which improves the road past the
Correct.
property.
That's a requirement to meet the county road standard, and it's a partnership of Minden City and Cache County.
Matt Phillips have any input on what Matt, do you know if there's?
Shaking his head.
Is he? You might as well sit
But
closer, Matt.
he knows the rules, so he's graciously coming up to be on record.
So far, there's a lot of what ifs, right? So when this conditional use comes in, we identify the traffic, then that will be a little easier to apply the road conditions. And I assume at this point that trailhead's gonna bring enough traffic that it would warrant that being paved within the county and possibly even further down into Mendon to resolve all those road issues. So that's my assumption, but there's no formal application, there's no CUP currently, so it's just a what if, so.
Other thoughts or questions you may have, Mr. Martin?
Well, and then what we'll do is we'll create an access off of 1000 South coming straight across. Of course, it'll be private. We'll fund it. We'll take care of it from start to finish. It's a road that the county won't have to ever worry about from there on. We're just making it 3. Because of this steep slope, we are just shy of, we have enough for 2, but we want 3 for our children. We won't expand it out anymore. It's just going to be that. We're not going to plan on doing any more expansion on it or anything.
3 lots, you say?
The 3 lots, yeah. We are currently okay to do 2, but we're just trying to get that 3rd one.
You've actually got 34 acres there.
Right.
If I'm correct, you could just stay with A10.
Can't because of the steep slope. It takes us right, we're just shy. We're just under the 30.
They won't divide that out?
No. No.
Take that out of the developable acreage.
And so that takes us under, and that's the reason we're requesting this. We've done the background work for, as far as getting all of the sewer systems in, everything's been okayed. We've got all the permits done on that. Minden City's gave us the okay to go ahead and where to build. We've talked about staying out of the zones that are, the protection and everything else. Everybody's given us it. So we just are looking for you as a county. The county is getting into a predicament where, as you know, more and more housing is coming in. And it's going to get that way. And we're just trying to take something that will work for the benefit of ours instead of just having the 2 to make it a 3rd lot. And that's what we're requesting from you, to be able to do that. And I believe, with the road as it is, there is, it's not going to change the amount of traffic on that other 1000 South right now. It's not going to change anyway. One of them is already living with us in our basement, and so that's not going to change. Plus, there's, like you said, the trailheads and the amount of traffic that goes by there. It's increased probably double this spring already than what it has, and so I don't think that the few houses that we will have, our kids are up at our place all the time as it is anyway, so that won't change the amount of traffic really that's there. So I think that is the only thing that's a concern. And but like I said, we're willing to work with the county on that. We've been willing to work with them on the other and help out too, as far as whatever it takes to get the Wayne's Loop back up and rolling and going again. And so we're just trying to be a good neighbor in that aspect too, and hopefully the county will work with us.
Okay, Mr. Martin, I don't want to speculate on what the commissioners might want to do, but it's possible that in order to approve this, some or all of the commissioners may want additional information to support that the road's going to get paved before approving this. So it's possible they'll want to table this for a little while just to understand that and get the information.
What are we looking for time frame on? We've been working with this for
It's up to
a year
them,
and a half.
and I may be totally wrong, but that might be something that comes up in our discussions. So we generally would continue an item up to 90 days. It doesn't mean it has to take that long.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
Just giving you a heads up.
okay.
So
So time frame maybe 90 days to before we even get an idea or thought or?
We still gotta hear what the public says. and
We'll
then
find out
talk.
here shortly. I'm just kind of preparing you for that potential. Okay?
Typical. It's
Yeah.
been like this the whole way. Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Sounds
Thank
good.
you.
Thank you, appreciate your time.
Hey, Tim, could I ask you a favor to come and close the doors for us? Is there anyone here that would like to make a comment on this item this evening? I'm not seeing any commissioners.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we close the public hearing.
Second motion.
So we have a motion and a second to close the public hearing on the Martin Bench rezone. Any further discussion? All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, commissioners, what would you like to do?
Well, that is a steep, rough road right now. And if they improve that, that parking area, it's gonna get a whole bunch more traffic. So, that road, is a major deal to be able to put more homes on it. I mean, for them as well, for those who are gonna build a house. That road will really get ugly if they don't add that kind of traffic. I'd sure feel better about it if we had an understanding with Mendon that that was on the plan, that it was close.
Yeah, I agree. Other thoughts?
I think the access, I mean, we definitely consider it in a rezone, but I also think, you know, that's part of the subdivision process as well, and so, you know, that's definitely what we'll hear at that point.
Yeah.
I doubt this is a road that's going to be left unimproved, if we're putting that kind of, load onto that. And if we're going to see a CUP, I definitely can see that as being a condition of approval for a CUP for the trailhead.
That's what we discussed. If we're moving that much and doing that, then that road should be addressed. And so it probably will be, but I cannot give a definitive on it, but I requested that information.
So,
That if ARPA funds are going up there for a parking lot, that we address the road before we do that.
I'm not trying to solve problems for the applicant, but if he wants 3 lots, he's got 1 more lot on the parcel where his house sits, and it gives him 2 more where this property is. I personally have concern with just the location, the distance from the city, and the steepness. I don't know. I know that like Maple Rise to the south has numerous homes along it, but if there was a road, a main road that bordered the property itself, I'd feel a lot better about it, but regardless, we can't change that, but I just don't feel real good about putting an RU5 right in that location. And if 3 lots are truly wanted, those 3 lots could be achieved, again, 2 out of the parcel at hand, 1 additional out of the parcel that the house sits on.
Yeah, point of clarification,
Well,
the parcel that has the house on it is part of a subdivision that was originally approved as a 5
Oh,
lot.
okay, so it's not based off of the 20.67?
No.
Well, regardless, I don't know, that's my opinion.
I'll give just one point on this. You know, we did receive comment from Mendon City, and they are, you know, very close, part of the annexation area. Their property borders this, and they did have a unanimous vote to not oppose, or what was it? Unanimously had no objection to the proposed zone change. So that speaks volumes to me about
Good point.
what the local community says, and they're gonna be the ones dealing with this in the future and directly in contact with their property. So good point. That speaks a lot to me.
I agree with that. I put a lot of weight into that letter from the city. I think the access, he owns that property. It's not even, you know, a letter from someone saying he can use my property to get across. It is his property. And I don't think this many is gonna make a difference on that road near as much as that trailhead's gonna make a difference on the road.
I agree.
That's true. Brandon?
I agree. Looking at what Mendon City said and condition of the road, I mean, that's gonna change.
Okay. Other thoughts? Comments? Okay, would somebody like to make a motion then?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve, that we recommend approval to the County Council of the Martin Bench rezone with the option 1, recommending approval with the 1 conclusion.
I'll second that.
So we have a motion and second to recommend approval to the County Council, the Martin Bench rezone. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Martin. Good luck. Okay, next item on our agenda is the Winnie's Properties rezone. We'll begin that with a report from staff.
Yes, so this is a rezone request for the RU2 zone from the agricultural A10 zone on 35.2 acres. A rezone may allow the parcels to be legally divided into a maximum potential of 17 separate lots as part of a subdivision amendment process. The current zone A10 allows for a maximum of 3 lots. As you can see, this was, it is currently part of a subdivision, a 2-lot subdivision, but no buildings or improvements have been made on that. And that subdivision approved in 2006. Surrounding context, this back. Sorry, motion sickness. Okay. So here you can see the parcels outlined in the yellow. This dark black boundary is the Wellsville City line. So immediately adjacent homes with the home, there are 2 parcels with an average lot size of 1 acre. Within Wellsville City, there are 4 parcels and an average lot size of 6.8 acres. When you expand that to a quarter mile, there are 5 parcels within unincorporated county with a home on it and an average lot size of 3.2 acres. And in Wellsville City, there are 48 parcels with a home and an average lot size of 1.6. And then when we expand that out to a half-mile buffer, unincorporated county, we just pick up 1 more, so there's 6 parcels with an average lot size of 2.8 acres that have a home on it. And within Wellsville City, there are 160 parcels with a home and an average lot size of 1 acre. Adjacent uses are primarily residential, agricultural, and as I mentioned, the Wellsville City boundary. If I zoom out here a little, it should color in. Wellsville is the green, is located immediately adjacent to the south and west of the property. As part of the application submittal requirements, since the property is immediately contiguous, a letter from the city was required regarding future annexation and access to services. In that letter, which is attachment B, dated May 6th, the city states no utility services are being provided, but strongly recommends annexation into Wellsville. As you might imagine, being immediately contiguous, it is located within the Wellsville City future annexation area. The city submitted a second letter signed by Mayor Bailey, dated June 27th, which is attachment C of your staff report, in which they oppose the proposed rezone. Reasons listed in the letter of opposition include the Wellsville City infrastructure, i.e. water and sewer, is located in close proximity to the properties and will be better for development versus individual septic system and wells. Future county development will benefit from Wellsville amenities and services without contributing to the city's tax base or impact fees. And the proposed rezone would interrupt and undermine the city's master plan. The nearest RU2 zone other RU2 zone from this subject property is about almost 4 miles away, north and west, along Highway 23 near Mendon, but is not immediately adjacent to the town's boundary. That RU2 zone was approved as the Rose Hills subdivision in 2014. As far as access goes, primary access is, so they do have a little frontage on this 200 East in Wellsville, but there's really not enough frontage to meet the county's requirements here. So primary access would be off of 6100 south. It is an existing county facility that provides access to multiple dwellings, ag uses, vacant lots, and provides through access from Highway 89, 91 to 3200 west. Classified as a minor local road, is paved and varies in width from 18 to 20 feet, is considered substandard as to right-of-way, paved and gravel shoulder width, and clear zones. Staff did notice the item. As mentioned, the attachment C from Wellsville City was received and included as part of your packet. Staff also received one additional public comment, which was included on your in the shared drive from Ms. Bankhead, also opposing the proposed rezone. As far as recommendations in conclusion, staff did recommend Planning Commission forwarded recommendation of denial to County Council as the proximity of the subject properties to the boundaries of Wellsville with access to utilities, emergency services, and infrastructure would be better served as part of a Wellsville City development through an annexation process. That concludes staff's report.
Okay, thank you, Angie. Commissioners, any questions for staff? Okay. If none, then I'd entertain a motion to open the public hearing.
I'll make that motion. We open a public hearing for the Winnie's Properties rezone.
I'll second that.
So a motion and a second to open the public hearing on the Winnie's Properties rezone. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. 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 Any opposed? Okay, so we've opened the public hearing on this item. Is Mr. Winquist present? Come on up. Okay, state your name for us, and please feel free to chime in on any of the questions or concerns that have been raised.
Okay, thank you for your time. My name is Cameron Winquist. I am here representing the C4 Group, which is a family that owns this acreage. I'd like to address some of the concerns that Angie had spoken about here. I have been working with Wellsville City and Scott Wells for approximately a year to a year and a half on this property. And the biggest problem that we have here is the mayor sent a letter saying that the utilities were within a close proximity. The sewer is approximately 1 mile away and on the other side of 89. We've gotten rough estimates on bringing the sewer over, and it's going to cost anywhere between $1 million to $1.5 million to bring that over at the expense of the Cable family. The city won't participate in any of that, any portion of it. And so I disagree with the mayor's letter when it says that it is within close proximity. Another item that he stated that they wouldn't benefit from the amenities that the city provides. I'm fairly certain that Wellsville City does not have a police department. I think that is county. And I think that the fire department is, I think, Wellsville City, but it's voluntary. So I'd like to make that known so that I don't feel that we're hindering any of their, we might be missing some of the things for the schools and things like that, but I feel that, and the Cable family feels that if the city was determined to stop us at the county, why aren't they determined to do something to bring the sewer over to that side of the highway so that not only we can develop that land, but other homeowners that own all that acreage there can do something with it. The, let me look here. Like I mentioned, they don't have any plans to bring that sewer over to us. And so we would like to continue on with the county. We have not been able to come to a resolve with the city in order to make it feasible. It's just not feasible to spend that kind of money to bring the sewer over to us. And we would have to bore under Highway 89 2 different times for the water as well. They'd want us to loop the water back into their system. And so, you know, the Cables are in their mid to late 60s and are looking to retire, and they purchased this property back in 2006. And I know it's not the county's responsibility for them to retire and live off what they've done, but if you could maybe take that into consideration of what they've been planning. And Wellsville City just hasn't brought the utilities over, therefore I don't believe that they're prepared for development over on that side of the highway yet. So that is why we're here today and would like to get this approved through the county.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Lindquist. Any questions for the proponent, commissioners? Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Is there anyone else here that would like to speak on this particular item? Yep, come on up. Just like everyone else, please state your name.
Scott Wells, Wellsville City. We have been working with Cameron on this. The concerns we have are ultimately, he has the ability to hook onto water and sewer. There is a cost, and that cost is part of development. Wellsville City doesn't have the money to help every development that wants to come to Wellsville. We rely on development to help us with our infrastructure. So that's the reality there. You know, we don't want to be a Millville and have problems with contaminated water, especially when they're not part of Wellsville City. You know, so we're really sensitive to septic tanks. We're trying not to put them anywhere we don't have to. So that's where they have the ability to hook onto sewer. We'd like them to do that. Water's already in that location, so water's a lot easier to hook onto. The other thing that we look at is our master plan. As we have the ability to grow, that's just a few pieces away from Wellsville. If we have a 2-acre parcel, they already have water, they already have sewer. There's no reason for them to ever participate with Wellsville City in our infrastructure. So that's the other problem we have, is it's close enough that we feel like it could hinder the growth as it goes to the east there.
Okay. Mr. Wells, give us a little more information on the proximity of the water and sewer.
So the water is across the highway, probably a city block away from it. It borders 200 East, where it goes right there as well. We're already looking at a lift station to a project to the south, you know, so we might have to do a lift station on this one as well to pump the sewer where we need it to. Gravity feed is much easier by all means, but if a lift station is needed, we just haven't explored any of that, the options for it to be there. This is about between 700 and 800 south. We have sewer on 800 south and about 100 east. So about 4 or 5 city blocks away from that. We have 2 sleeves under the highway on 700 south, but we're having a rough time finding our sleeves. You know, so that's where he said he would have to bore it. If we can't find those sleeves, that is absolutely correct. He would have to bore the highway. That is an added expense. Like I say, the sleeves are there, we just can't find them.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Wells? Okay.
Thank you for your time.
Come on up, state your name, please.
My name is Jay Bankhead, and I'm a property owner that has property adjacent to this proposed development. And I just wanted to state my opposition to this, especially as developing through the county. If it was through Wellsville City, I mean, I don't think I would have much of an objection to that. My main objection is the water and also the septics. You know, that's got a slight, the elevation, it descends to where our property is. So it has a natural slope there. We also have a well that's been in existence for 40 plus years. We use that to not only for the water from my mom's place, but also for some agriculture purposes. So we have, In other properties that we own just up the street from there, we've demonstrated to the state, trying to protect our spring water rights. As development is encroached on our property or on the agriculture, we have flow meters on a couple of our springs. We've been able to demonstrate that the more wells that have been developed have depleted the springs' capabilities. And I do irrigation for a living. I know what wells do when you drill wells. To have wells enough for 17 houses, first of all, that's completely outside of the scope of that property area or that area. There are a few more homes being built there, but it's mostly agriculture. Obviously, it's zoned A10. And I just feel like the developers need to pay for the cost of development to get it annexed into the city. The drilling that many wells to supply homes would be a detriment to the property owners that already are in existence there. So that's what I wanted to state.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bankhead. Anyone else like to make comment? Come on up, please.
Again, Cameron Winquist. I'd like to add just a few things. Scott had mentioned that we would potentially hinder the future development up that road east of us. But we would not hinder anything. I talked with Scott on the phone yesterday. Anybody can take the sewer. The city at any time can take the sewer up that county road. We would not interfere with that in any way, shape, or form. As far as the wells go and drilling the wells, I know that there's party wells available, and we'd have to do some more research, but I think if you could drill 3 wells and feed 17 homes off of that, no problem. And as far as the Scott had mentioned that they're opposed to the septic tanks. Wellsville City just approved for the Coopers 2 lots over there that are closer proximity on the other side of Highway 89 with septic tanks.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
My name's Kurt Bankhead, and I oppose this development. One, obviously, my brother brought up was the water. As you probably know, there's out in that location, there's 6 wells that I know of that have gone dry the last year. They've had to re-drill them and go deeper. So there's already a big burden on the aquifers out there. The other concern is the traffic. That road's pretty narrow as it is. Farming up and down it, it's pretty tight. So having 17 more homes on that is going to really affect the ability to get up and down that road. And then even if you drill 3 wells, that's still going to be the same amount of water as 17 wells, because it's going to be 17 homes. So I'm against this development. I think a developer should have to pay to go in this close to the city annex in and pay for that cost, so the people that live there, like me and some of my other neighbors here, don't have to pay for that once the development's in and gone. And so I oppose that, and if you have any questions, feel free to give them. If not, I'll sit down. So,
Thank you, Mr. Bankhead.
Give us your phone number, we'll pass it around.
Give me yours.
Come on up.
Hello, my name is James Smith. I live at 3734 West, 6100 South, which would be that house there in the picture. I oppose this as well. Our well runs okay. If I try to water the lawn with my well, it kicks up dirt and it struggles already. There's no way 17 wells drilled right there, it would dry everything up. And that's a lot of traffic on 6100. That road isn't prepared to handle that traffic. It would have to be redone.
Okay. Thank you very much. Anyone else like to comment on this item tonight? Okay, looks like that's all the comments, commissioners.
I move that we close the public hearing.
I'll second that.
Motion and second to close the public hearing on the Winnie's Properties rezone. Any further discussion?
You want to speak to this?
Did you want to speak on this item?
No, you went back past the first one so quick. I didn't get a chance to raise my hand.
Oh, sorry.
That's the first one you brought up. Stewart Minor subdivision.
Oh, my goodness. I'm afraid we've already,
That one wasn't a public hearing,
right.
but you did ask.
Yeah, I did ask. I apologize that you missed on that one, sir. Okay. Well, we've already moved on, so thank you very much. So we have a motion and second to close the public hearing on the Winnie's Properties rezone.
Brandon gave the second.
Yeah.
Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, what would you like to do, commissioners?
I have a couple questions. Like on individual, well, I know sewer or city have like the protection zones. We talked about that, the water protection areas. Do they have those on individual wells? Do those have protection zone areas?
No, but Bear River Health Department does require a certain distance between septic and wells.
Has to be a community and public.
And then I know in the past, sometimes when people have to go through this extra large expense early on to bring some of this infrastructure over, then later they're able to sometimes get some of that back from other people who develop in the next, and I know it's not for, forever, but if someone else develops in the next 5 or 10 years, they can sometimes get some of that money back from other people who develop. Is that?
It's called a pioneering agreement. The county attorney's office has discussed the possibility of bringing that to the county, but as far as I'm aware, there's nothing in the works to make that come about anytime soon.
Usually that's just limited to something like Utah Power or Mountain Fuel, something that's a corporation rather than a municipality. The municipality is providing the sewer, so.
Were you
I'm done.
Mr. Chairman, I had a couple thoughts.
Okay, please.
I think back to John White, our prior liaison with the council, and I really appreciated early on his comments that whenever, as the county, we want to work closely with the cities. And I remember early on him telling us that if and when we get a response from a city inside of an annexation zone such as this, that it's important that we listen to the city and yield to their direction, much like we kind of discussed how we solved the Menden situation.
Yes.
I appreciate both sides of this issue and those that commented, but I would tend to lean heavy to Wellsville City's. I empathize with the cost to bring it across, but I would tend to yield to the Wellsville City statement and letter and support their. That's my thoughts.
Yeah. Just an addendum to that, as we've looked at these, our goal is to put the higher density near the municipalities, but if we can direct that growth within the municipalities, that makes more sense. That's been our goal and our direction as we've gone on. My concern with this one is the size, the scope, the scale of this, and the immediate proximity to the city limits. It, in my opinion, makes much more sense to be within Wellsville City because it will be in short order. As the utilities go across the highway, it will be Wellsville City, and to me, it makes much more sense to allow that process to take place. That doesn't preclude the applicant from developing this with larger lot sizes. It just pushes it back until they can take all of that, take advantage of all of their potential.
Lane? Yeah, I would say the purpose of planning and zoning commission is to look at these and say, how does it fit for the county today? Something else comes along that's closer to that and helps pay to bring that sewer over, therefore it makes it more interesting to Wellsville City to annex that property in the future. But when you're that far out, where I live right now, had a developer come in, bought an adjacent property, knowing that he was gonna have to put in all of that infrastructure. He's gonna have to put in his own pumping station and that. He just figured that into the value of the deal. And when he went to, so he got it annexed into the city, knowing that those expenses were part of that development. And I think that's the way we have to look, and as a county, why these smaller developments that we've talked about already tonight, you know, we weigh all that together, but this large development, 17 homes, that close to the city limits, but yet far enough away that it changes the whole look of that side of the highway. I think it's not time yet. I think that if a developer wants to go that far, that they should stand the expense of hooking onto all that sewer and water. Yeah, it's an expense, but it's their expense. It's their benefit.
Thank you, Mr. Parker. Brandon, other thoughts?
I just agree with what's already been said. I mean, the other ones that we've approved recently, there's kind of set a precedence for what we have approved have been all more concentrated, closer to the city, smaller, you know, subdivision type deal, like where they're 1 or 2 lots, 3 lots at most. It seems like it just doesn't fit what we've been, what our goal's been.
Thank you. Any other thoughts, commissioners? Okay, I'm in agreement with the comments that have been made, so I don't have anything else to add. So now might be a good time for a motion, commissioners.
I'll make a motion that we recommend to the county council the denial of the Winnie's Properties rezone based on the items we've discussed. The one conclusion, yes, excuse me, there it is. The one conclusion.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second the motion.
So we have a motion and a second to recommend denial of the Winnie's Property rezone to the county council. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, Mr. Winquist, you have another chance in front of the county council who will consider our recommendation. And there's always a chance they'll make a different decision, so good luck. Okay, looks like we are to item number 6 on our agenda. Public hearing for amending the use-related definition of private airport. Who's going to be taking that one on? Chris, his last hurrah on public airports, or private airports, I should say.
Get my,
How appropriate, I would say.
I don't know about that, but
We forced him into it because none of us wanted to.
So we'll start with the staff report on this? Okay.
I don't know. Oh, there it goes. Okay. Ignore that note. So we've discussed this a couple times at a couple meetings. And just as a reminder, our discussion has been, as we've seen different private airports come through, a recognition of some of the concerns that have been voiced by the commission and by council, that private airports seem like a good idea, but is there a way to limit their impact on adjoining property owners? And that was specific to some of these zones and areas that overlay onto the other properties. Often the perception of the property owner adjoining is that we put some sort of burden on them. We've kind of tried to work around that with previous discussions. One of those we stated it'd have to come back to the commission for review or reconsideration, I think was a term, if there was a home built in that. So what ended up happening is there was a time set up for the commission, anticipated time that someone was going to build a structure within one of those areas and would have to come back. So in our discussion, most recently, we talked about some opportunities to amend that language, and I'm providing that language here, and it's was in your packet of things there that you could review. And I've made a couple additional amendments from what our discussion was last time, where we discussed how do we handle noise. I couldn't find any great reference. And in fact, everything I found pointed away from using a reference instead of trying to tie or account for a nuisance from noise based on a sound study. So I removed that entirely. We retained, I cleaned up some language also under 5810, private airport, just at the beginning, just for clarity. It didn't change the meaning. Instead of saying including uses that may be pertinent and accessory to, a pertinent and accessory are the same word, so we just clean that up and say a pertinent to. Also, you'll notice under application, airport, a copy of the airport master record is recommended to be deleted. What that creates is a chicken and egg scenario for the applicant. Usually the airport master record comes later in the process. It's not something they would have even contemplated pursuing or having in hand at the time they make application. Often we'll find this with the state and federal agencies. They want to see federal or local approval first before they will be comfortable moving forward. And so when we set up that there needs to be federal kind of awareness about it first, then we create this scenario where they're not sure what to do. So the recommendation there is that's just removed from that application requirement. Another question that's come up that we've recognized is the FAA updates their circular on occasion. Right now the language says under item application 1B, a copy of the design criteria, this would have to come as part of the application, as per the current FAA Airport Design Advisory Circular AC 150/5300-13A is the current read. That's problematic because it says the current, but in fact, when they update those things, if it changes to something else, well, what do we mean? It creates ambiguity in what we're actually requiring. So the term the current is removed, and the current circular is identified as what we would adopt, which is 13B, which has minor amendments specific to, not major amendments that would affect us, but minor amendments that they do on occasion, time to time. And we can get into the details of that as needed, if there needs to be clarification on that piece. I'm not prepared to address all those pieces, but we can prepare for that. The main consideration is item 2, when we talk about location. So this is requiring that an airport and the following must be located within the boundaries of the property owned or leased by the proponent. Now this reflects the recommendations found in that circular that says to create a safe place on the ground with these different zones and areas. Really the best thing to do is to have control of those properties rather than waiting for something to happen that someone builds there and you have no impact or influence to say, please don't. Or that's all you can do is ask, please don't. So what this does is says if someone wants a private airport on their property, it has to be 100% on their property, including all appurtenant uses and structures and, excuse me, I'm not emotional about it, and all zones and areas related to the land use and associated with the required design criteria specified in the noted design criteria, or advisory circular, excuse me. That means that the impact on adjoining property owners and conflict that may result from it is much reduced. And it makes clear to an applicant coming in what the expectation is, instead of coming through the process and it being assigned as a condition of approval rather than just knowing up front what the requirement would be. I like that better as staff, and I think the commission would appreciate that, as would the applicant.
Clarification on that. So when we say owned or leased, they can lease just
the area or zone,
or maybe not lease the entire property, but lease the right to control. I don't know what the legal term would be, but they wouldn't have to actually have control. So let's say there's a farm field at the end of the runway, the area that we're talking about. They could lease just that part of it to fly over or whatever.
That would be my understanding. Without getting into the legal, the question of what can you do with the lease? Can you set up the lease to restrict somebody else putting structures on that property? I guess that's a great question. I would leave it there and say that's a great question. I can't fully answer that.
I'm just thinking of how the rubber meets the road when that happens. You know, the farmer has that piece of property there, yeah, I'll lease you, you can fly airplanes over it, pay me $100 a year and you have that, but you can't use my property for anything else besides that.
And maybe a better language there would be easement.
Easement.
Typically with most airports, there's navigation easement attached to those that secures a right without purchasing the property. So maybe the correct language there would not be easement, but, I'm sorry, not lease, but easement.
Yeah, I don't think lease is good because as soon as it sells, or the way things are going today, you can lease property and the owner decides next year he wants to sell it, then we're in the same predicament as if we're in with this prior situation.
I'll make a note on that and have it state instead, if everyone's okay with that approach, to say that instead of saying boundaries of property owned or leased, rather say boundaries of property owned by the proponent or within an easement in place to protect those areas and zones. Is that more?
I think that protects everybody better.
You would have to have an understanding property owner who would want to throw an easement on there versus lease. And I agree with what Brady and you guys are bringing up. I just asked Taylor about that myself, because lease is gone, but a CUP is more in there, so.
And an easement will definitely change the agreement on the lease. If it's just a lease, hey, can I fly over your property? You go into that with the knowledge that, well, I can cancel that lease per the lease agreement.
And I think that protects the next person who buys that property or whatever, because it's.
Or the next person that buys the property knows that there is an easement. It is impaired, this property is impaired.
Are you okay with it?
So FAA requirements then, so you would have, at your flyover zone, going along parallel, or even with the runway, but you'd still have a zone that would be a noise type thing off to the side. You wouldn't have to have a lease on all the property within the noise barrier, but just the flyover zone, which is designated by FAA then.
Yeah, with the private airports, we're not dealing with some of those larger issues like you would at Logan Airport, where you have the LDN, these larger noise-specific type zones. Those aren't accommodated or addressed in that. Primarily, we're looking at approach zones, areas, we're looking at runway protection zones, and the different areas within those, and then also the obstruction-free area zones on anything specific to the ground. Primarily, anything in the air, we're not touching it. That's all FAA's jurisdiction.
Can I just ask a question on the final paragraph was lined through?
Yes, that one.
Reasoning behind it, we just not gonna touch that, or?
I left it last time and I thought about it more and more. How in the world am I gonna police that?
Yeah.
Why would I even say that I'm gonna say something about it?
I guess I could say it gives you. So what is let me ask the question first before I opine. By lining through that, are we saying that a temporary or intermittent airport does require permitting, or we're just turning a blind eye to?
Yeah, it's not addressed. So if somebody wants to land their plane, all we're talking about is a private airport. Here's what we've defined, and that's it.
Okay, I won't go any further.
Removing ourselves from trying to have the
Somebody lands an
property
airplane
owners.
in an alfalfa field somewhere. We don't have anything to do with that.
We don't really care. Not that we don't care, but there's
no way
those
to.
are kind of a one-off instance. Like if someone's constantly landing in a certain place, that would raise a flag, and we'd have to have a discussion, say, what's happening?
Right.
And that becomes more of a question about enforcement and them coming forward to say, here's what we're doing. Then we can focus on the private airport rather than trying to distinguish, well, are you temporary or intermittent? Or private airport?
Agreed.
And we have no way to track that without asking someone to sit there and document each and every flight, or request a view of their flight logs if they're keeping accurate flight logs. it didn't seem very tenable for us to set a requirement we can't enforce.
Sounds great.
So with that, I just have one quick question. So the whole thing that brought the airport thing to start with was we had a plane landed on a public road in Mendon. And so from there, I mean, there might have been something else,
There's a
but
couple, but that's
that
not
was a
one.
big factor.
Absolutely. Yep.
So my question is, and the prior airport that we worked on, so their CUP was revoked. So can they intermittently still land at that airport, or can they not?
With this change,
With any, yeah, without a CUP there, when we officially said that because there was homes obstructing that runway or takeoff, can they still intermittently land there?
if this were removed, we're not saying that they can or they can't. But if they're gonna use it and it meets the requirements of a private airport.
I would like to speak to that.
Well, you're actually gonna have a chance to, but I just wanted to ask that question.
So that's with anywhere in the county. So if it poses a danger to property owners, there's multiple bodies involved in this. It isn't just the county. If they're flying too low, if they're buzzing through houses, if they're doing stuff like that, that's probably a FAA question in violation, especially if they're not touching the ground. Or it becomes a nuisance violation that has to be 3 or more neighbors that take that concern via state code to the county fire chief. That's the current avenues. There's also options. You could contact the police department, but they'll probably just tell you, I would ask them what they tell you, but maybe they'll ask you to talk to the FAA because they're still in airspace. So short answer to a long answer for a question, whatever I'm trying to say, is I don't know what the best avenue would be to move that forward, but all we want to concern ourselves with is the land use piece. So if they're constantly landing at the site, that's probably a private airport. That's when we go have a discussion with them. And we don't want to distinguish between those two pieces. We just want to see if they're acting as a private airport, which means there's a more permanent use at the site.
I think you've done a lot of work on that, and it sounds like there's always some little glitch that seems to fly in the mix, but it sounds like we've covered that very well with what we know about airports and small airports in the valley have done and thoughts of what they might be. So I think you've done a good job of putting that together for us.
Yeah, I think the biggest piece there is that location item. And this is what the commission pointed to and the council pointed to is a more important piece is that eliminates a lot of these conflicts we've seen with these different airports is when they're too proximate to structures, other homes, people. And that is a very obvious safety issue, from my perspective.
I think initially, when it was added to the code, it was, you envisioned some large property owners.
Yeah. Got a big dry farm out
With
there.
a big
He
dry
owns
farm, and
everything
he's
within
flying out to his
2,000 acres.
property out there.
And 2 of the 3 that we've approved are exactly that.
Yeah.
They're more remote comparatively to what we have with the other that was remote.
So this addresses those concerns.
I think so.
Is that it from you, Chris? Staff report?
That's it for me. If there's other amendments, let me know, but
Comments or questions for staff? Okay.
I'll make those updates, pass them on to staff here, and they'll come back to you for action.
Well, we have a public hearing, though.
Oh,
So-
sorry.
This is listed as a
I'm
public.
getting ahead of myself.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm getting ahead of myself.
That's okay.
Um,
We're gonna require that you come back. If that's the case. If we don't vote on it tonight, you have to come back to the next meeting where we do vote
I don't
on
know
it.
if that'll happen, but I appreciate the invitations.
Okay, any other thoughts before we open the public hearing? Okay,
Mr. Chairman, I'd move that we open a public hearing regarding amending 17.07.030 use-related definitions for the 5810 private airport.
Second motion.
okay, we have a motion and second to open the public hearing on the private airport use related definition changes. Any further discussion? All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. If you'd like to make a comment, please come on up, state your name.
My name is Dirk Howard. I live in the Mendon area, 6473 West, 400 South, next to the former Holyoke Airport CUP. I looked at the proposed changes to the ordinances, and the one point that I made that I wanted to make sure was covered was the lease issue and what would happen when that expires. And I don't know enough about granting an easement, if that can be revoked by a property owner in the future, or if it has expiration or anything like that. I just want to know kind of what happens if the land that has an easement on it, if that changes hands, can that easement be revoked by a future property owner? And if so, what happens to the conditional use permit of the airport? Because I think that it is important that the airport operator has control of all of the land that the protection zone land on. That has been the biggest issue on any of the airports that have been brought up, is the impact that's on the neighbors because of runway protection zones and other zones that are imposed on other property owners. And I just want to make sure that that's covered thoroughly.
Council, you want to opine on that?
So just to give a brief overview of what an easement is, an easement involves two properties, and one property gives to the other property a certain right. So every property comes with a certain bundle of rights. There's minerals and right to build a house and water and so forth. And so when you transfer an easement, it creates a relationship between the two properties. One of them is the dominant estate, and one of them is the servient estate. The one who holds the easement over this other property is the dominant estate, and that easement runs with the land. And so what that means is, even if the land changes hands, you can go 100 years. So for example, there are many places that have an easement that allows someone to drive over someone else's property. Those two pieces of property can change hands many, many times in over 100 years, and then at the end, if the two properties are still separated, that easement will still exist. And so that easement can be voluntarily given up. You can give it, the dominant estate can give it back. The servient estate can buy it back. There's a variety of different ways that that problem can be addressed. If the two properties ever are bought together and controlled by the same person, that can extinguish the easement. So it's a property right that is just exchanged and it runs with the land. So.
Okay. Thank you for that. Come on up.
My name is Carrie Rich, and I live in Petersboro, near where the Holyoke Airport originally was. And we want to express our support and approval appreciation for what you've done about this and for the new proposed amendment. We just want to propose a couple of other things that some have already been addressed. But we feel these need to do because we're not addressing like the safety of landing and taking off planes in the area where there are homes. And some of what you have in this original amendment talks about the direction of the runway, but there's also safety to be considered in homes in the other direction. Like in the Holyoke, we were talking about this runway where it runs north and south, but are we protecting the residents who build east and west also? Because an airplane above presents landing and taking off in that area presents safety for anyone who lives in that area. And we also need to make sure that we specify that property, because it doesn't say anywhere that property owners could still say that according to the FAA, that permit is not required. We've already had that happen a weekend ago. The Holyokes landed and took off their plane on that runway because now they're saying the FAA says they don't have to have a permit. And in the 434 pages that the FFA has, it does not specify that they have to have a permit. And when we've had residents call about it, they have said, that's why you have to count on your county leaders to specify. We're over the air. Your county leaders are over the land. They have to specify what can be done on the land. And so he already landed a plane and went 20 yards into her property. She has photos of tracks 20 yards into her property. So obviously what he does doesn't even fit within the land that he has. And even though his CUP was revoked, he's still landing his plane under what we talked about, saying, you know, I don't have to have a permit because the FFA doesn't say I have to. So as a county, we're counting on you to specify what can be done on the property, protect our safety. There needs to be explicit language that talks about a private airport must be set back from property boundaries 1/2 mile in all directions, things like that. Or that they have to make it clear it's the responsibility to protect those lands around by the county. Your verbiage needs to specify what they can and can't do, because he's already using that land, even though we've for 2 years been in this battle. Now he's saying, well, I've read the 430-page thing. It doesn't say the FFA has to have a permit, because the FAA doesn't live here. They don't, so that's why they only have to specify what happens in the air. You need to specify what can happen on the land to protect all of us. And of course, airplanes in the air, present a safety hazard for anybody. As we just saw recently, I don't know if you know, an airplane just crashed in Mendon just a week ago. And while we can't protect anywhere that an airplane lands or crashes like that, it is more likely that an airplane is going to crash if it's in an area where there's a landing and takeoff zone, correct? And if we allow that in an area where there is more homes, it's more likely it will hit a home or people or children. So we need to be aware of that and specify that. So in summary, we feel the county needs to make it clear that explicit that airplanes cannot take off or land where there are residents nearby. Like we talked about, the airports that have been put in before have put on where there are hundreds, maybe thousands of acres. As Cache Valley grows and as it becomes less of a rural community and we have more homes in more rural areas, we need to be protective of that land. The small acreage that like the Holyoaks owned cannot fit an airport. There are too many homes around that presents. And so while this amendment is great, we just need to be a little more thorough in the verbiage so that these kinds of things can't come up, protecting the people on all sides around the airport, and also specifying that they do need a permit to land and take off their plane, not leaving that up to the FAA. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, my name's Emily Stoker. I live on Center Street, and we have been there since, 2017, and I have to say I've been going through the same thing as Carrie. I agree with her 100% and what Dirk said as well. And I just want to make it clear that I thank you for listening, because this is the first time I've ever been heard on this in one of these meetings about this subject. And we've been going through this since 2017 when we were told that if we built our house, by you guys, the county told us, if we built our home, which is in direct line with the Holyoaks Airport, in fact, our property is part of the runway and its safety zones. You told us that if we built our home, that's it, it's over, we can't have an airport there. 2019, we found out that they did have a permit, and ever since then, we've been trying to help you guys understand our issues with it, and mostly is just safety of my family. And we weren't informed, we weren't told, no notice by any neighbors ourselves. Nobody knew about this new permit that was given to them. And that's just wrong. We need to have a say. It's our neighborhood, it's my home, that they're using my property and my neighbors for their own personal use, for their airport to land and take off. And Carrie's right, there isn't enough space there to do that. And since then, we have been buzzed, we have been harassed by airplanes flying and coming and scaring my kids. And we all live in dry farms. We have dry farms out there. If a plane crashes, what do you think's gonna happen? In 2 seconds, there's gonna be a fire and it's gonna spread like crazy. And there's homes, and more homes are being built, and that's not gonna stop. It's gonna keep going. People are gonna still keep building out there. This is growth. It's gonna happen whether we like it or not. And, I think that's what needs to be considered here are people. And These are families, and we're trying to just keep our families safe. And I am completely opposed to small aircraft in any neighborhoods, even rural. And I just want to make that clear that we have an airport right here in Logan. There's no reason for private planes to be landing in residential areas, unless you do have several acres to do that and you're on your own property, but not infringing on other people, their crops and their farm animals and their families. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Carrie Goodsell, and I own the property that borders Hollyoaks. I've been dealing with it now for as long as these guys have. We've addressed this many times. I appreciate you guys trying to, get through this with us. But like Carrie said, and Emily, they did drive through my hay ground before it was cut. I have pictures, drone footage, and I don't appreciate that coming through my hay property. It's obvious that there is not enough runway for their plane to take off without using my land as their runway and their runway protection zone. I don't feel as a landowner I should have to give an easement to anyone or a right-of-way to anyone for them to land a plane. It's my property, and I want to keep it that way. I want to keep it as it is. I don't want to have to worry about, well, I have to give the neighbor an easement.
Let me just put you at ease. You control the easement.
Right.
You sign authorization, so if you don't sign that, no easement.
Right. But that's what they're saying is, okay, well, maybe you can go to the neighbor and see if you can get an easement. But that's not what I want to do. But my land is being used as part of their runway. And in this hot weather, it's going to take that much further for the plane to take off. That's a fact. When you have planes in this hot weather, you don't get as much lift and you have further to go. So it was obvious they went into my land, and I did file a report with the county, haven't heard a word. Don't know if that was ever looked at or not, but I do agree with all of the following neighbors. We don't, I think it's a safety issue. My field right now is bone dry. If there was a spark, it would go up. So I appreciate you guys letting us talk, letting us voice our concern. This is the first time we've been able to do this. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
So there's an enforcement piece that comes to my office, so we collect all those pieces. I have a copy of what she's referred to that I can pass on for enforcement purposes.
We
And
also
I was-
sent one too, as well.
And, well, I have a couple of questions for staff after the public comments, and we'll have a more thorough response on some of those things, so thank you.
My name is Laura Barris, and we live in Mendon, just south of the former Holyoke conditional use permit airstrip. And again, we appreciate the change to the language, but this is going to be a continuing, ongoing problem with neighbors getting buzzed and being a hazard to people and property, because the way the language, there's still too many loopholes. Again, the FAA doesn't say that there needs to be any permit. So if we leave it as is, then yes, airplanes can continue to land, and that's a safety hazard, as been shown by many videos and pictures presented to the county. Even if it's intermittent or occasional, it's not safe to have airplanes landing and taking off so close to homes. They barely clear the houses. Those airplanes barely clear the houses, as has been shown by these pictures and videos. So it needs to be clear in the language of the county code that airplanes cannot be landing or taking off when there are homes within a certain distance. Now, if the runway protection zone and everything is within the airport owner's land or lease, it still presents a problem because there are can be houses on either side. And the other thing is, if that easement were to go in effect and say I granted that easement, then that's still a problem to houses that are still close by. There can't be just an easement granted that affects all the other houses that are close by. Those airplanes will still buzz over the top of the houses. So this, we just needs to be the county regulating what happens on the ground because it affects those houses and people on the ground. So that's why we would propose that there be some additional language that says, that any private airport must be set back from property boundaries 1/2 mile in all directions, or whatever amount of land is considered, it's just we'd say 1/2 mile, but it has got to be a specific amount of land in all directions of the airport, because just so that the airplanes are not flying over the top. When they land and take off, they are so close to the top of houses, and that's the big safety hazard. And that will continue to happen. And we'll continue to have these meetings and, the litigation and 434 pages of FAA code if the county doesn't step in and say, okay, no landing or taking off in an area where there are houses. Thank you.
Thank you. Any others like to make comment on item number 6? Okay, commissioners, I don't see any.
Move that we close the public hearing on the airport, or amending 1707-30, or .30, private airports 5810.
Sorry, I second it.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, thank you, and we appreciate the feedback and comments. I had a few questions, and then I'll open it up to commissioners. So a few points that I wrote down that were brought up. Someone commented that there's a new permit. I'm pretty sure we revoked the permit last month. Is that correct?
Yes, I think maybe this is a reference to, maybe not a new permit, but the fact that the original permit was recorded, and there was a new site plan that made that possible because of the location of the home. They shifted the length of the runway, shortened those protection zones and areas, and that may be the reference that's being made.
Okay. So as per the county, is it still in operation?
No, not permitted to be. I've heard that they are, based on those complaints.
Yes.
If they are flying in the area, they are landing in the area. That's been stated.
And in that regard, that's my second question. What's the process for issuing a complaint about a use that is no longer permitted?
They've done that. So typical process is there's a violation complaint form found on the county website that you fill out and submit to the county. That's the more formal process. We also receive emails. That's pretty common. People make a phone call, but kind of what kicks that process off is that violation complaint form. The current challenge is I'm also the violation enforcement officer. So for me to do that, there's usually a delay. I get a look at enforcement pieces not as often as I would like, which is why the county is currently in the process of hiring an enforcement officer that's all they do.
Okay.
So the hope would be is that those things are addressed more quickly, more responsibly than they currently are.
Great.
The other piece that would tie to that isn't just tied to the land use enforcement, but if someone's driving onto your property, that's a different type of trespass that has nothing to do with land use. In the sense of someone's on your property that's not supposed to be, that's a sheriff's office call.
A civil complaint.
Correct.
Okay. Okay, commissioners, you have any other questions or comments for?
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
I feel that we need to, I don't want to put another burden on an enforcement officer, but I think it's awesome that people have planes, and I want them to land them where it's safe. But the intermittent, I really think we need to put another step in there and say for intermittent landing, it should follow the same criteria as of our actual airports. If it's not safe to land there in an airport situation or circumstance, why should it be safe to intermittent land there?
So our current language says it's allowed, and you're saying we need to add language that says you can't land, period. I'm just restating to make sure I understand.
That's my intent, yes. If it's not safe to land there, under any other circumstance, and granted, we all have different judgment, but just to prevent somebody making a wrong judgment, I would be in favor of stating that in a residential area, if you don't own or control the landing and the runway, you don't land anytime. But Mr. Parker's our pilot, so I'd like to hear your opinion.
Yeah, that's, well, the way this reads is if somebody's flying and they have a problem, they think they got a problem, you get it on the ground before you have a problem.
It's an emergency.
Before it's an emergency. If that happens to be the spot, maybe that happens to be the spot. Maybe it's at my place next time, maybe it's at your place next time.
I'm fine with that.
Yeah, and so this, because it's been discussion for so long, yeah, that seems to ring a bell that, oh, he's harassing. But if that's the case, then that's still not under us. That goes back to law enforcement. So I think that's where this particular thing goes. But if you have, I think the way the language is it's more general that before you have a problem, you put it on the ground. When you recognize you're losing oil pressure, you put it on the ground.
And I think Chris's explanation on this was good. I mean, we know we have the one elephant in the room, but we're looking generally at everything that transpires in the county. If it becomes a problem, then it's an enforcement issue. If it looks like an airport, then we'll go down that road. If you're worried about your oil pressure and you put it down in Mayfield, make sure the hay's cut first.
Check that.
I don't think anybody's going to have an issue with a pilot that has concerns about the safety of their plane, putting it down into a field somewhere. But if that becomes a continual thing, or there's a safety concern that's noted from that, then it becomes that enforcement issue. But just putting it in general terms, I think is probably problematic.
So staff, which would help you best in enforcement? Do you need something saying that if it's not safe as an airport, it's not safe to be intermittent? Or do you just handle it case by case?
I wrote up some language just to see if this would cover it, if this kind of addresses what you're thinking. Except in the case of an emergency, landing on property proximate to a residence is not permitted.
That's vague for proximate.
Proximate, I don't have a reference to say what would be appropriate, so it comes back to the question above it. So do we need to add an additional buffer? Is it specific to the zoning? Is it specific to the proximity of residential uses? What is that buffer based on? How are we making a determination as to what proximate means? Exactly that question.
I would add also that in the state code, it's already a rule, the use of private landing fields must not impose a hazard upon the person or property above. So that's already a rule that exists. It's a broad rule.
Where the state code?
Yes.
So that's something that could be enforced upon based on that code?
Yeah, so whether or not the land use authority here in the county wants to be more specific and go beyond that, that's up to your discretion, but the question of whether or not we can enforce something that's causing a hazard to persons or property, that already exists in our state code.
So there is an avenue to pursue without taking action.
It is broad in the sense that it just says it's a hazard. It's not specific in the sense of what that means. So that's where you could use some additional refinement to say what the county thinks that means, what a hazard, what would pose a hazard. Is it a distance? What would pose a hazard to habited or residential areas? Keep in mind we can't control airspace.
So Lane, when they bring up maybe not within a half mile of any houses, is that excessive for like a pilot?
That's excessive. Yeah, and FAA has their standard, and they're talking about a zone, but, yeah, a guy can miss a runway anytime, I guess, but if he's competent enough to be in the air at all, he ought to be able to put it down within.
The RPZ, right? I mean, that's what that's for?
Yes.
That's that little give and take for,
Those are established buffers that have substance behind them.
But that's an established airport.
Well, I see what you're saying, yes.
Because, I mean, we're really looking generally at intermittent or whatever the language was in there, and there's a FAA definition behind those. But I just come back to, we're looking broadly, you know, we're not looking at one specific case, we're looking at.
I would also raise that there are more aircraft than just fixed wing aircraft. There are helicopters that land next to the hospital that are very close to residences, so making a rule, we need to be mindful of the different aircraft that are.
And UAVs may even fall into that.
They have separate rules. UAVs have separate.
They're separate.
Separate rules.
Other thoughts, questions?
These are only in the A10 zone? Is that right?
Ooh, I don't remember.
Sounds like we'll
That
look that
wouldn't
up.
be, because they weren't A10.
It was A10 FR40.
They weren't I don't think that parcel would have been 5 acres, would it? Or would it?
It still was A10.
Might have been smaller than 10 acres, but still.
But it was still A10 zone.
But still, and I think FR40 was also in that.
Right, but I mean, not the RU5 or RU2.
Yes, yeah, I don't think it was in the chart.
Yep, all the zones with the exception of RU2, RU5. So there was an understanding of the residential component. And another thing I'm going to point out is keep in mind that the primary use of the A10 zone is not houses. It's airplanes. It's airplanes. It's agriculture. It's agriculture. So even in the A10 zone, houses are not the primary use. They are secondary to the ag use. And honestly, airplanes closer to ag than houses. And so what we were working on with our general plan and what will come in months to come is updating our zoning to better reflect what's happening on the ground and what needs to happen with our agricultural zones. Because that increased development has been expressed, will continue, and that ag land will just continue to be pressured and developed over time. It's just how that works. Unless there's some more active incentives or opportunities that are proposed under the county zoning or development processes. So, I get the conflict with residents, but the residents is infringing on the agricultural use, and we allow that. But it's secondary to ag, it's not the primary. But there are some safety issues still attached. We can't ignore the safety piece that is attached to allowing the ag and resident to occur in the same place.
But we also have an avenue to enforce through current state code for any of those hazards that are imposed.
And the enforcement has been a challenge because we haven't had an active enforcement officer. It's been kind of on the back burner with the county for a number of years. So I'm very encouraged by the fact that the council was engaged and willing to move forward on an enforcement officer that can more actively just help enforce the law that's adopted.
Remind us how many private airports we have.
3.
3.
In the whole valley.
2.
In the whole valley.
Was 3, now 2.
There's some illegal ones.
Right. Okay, thank you. Other questions or comments for staff? Chris, what did you envision us doing tonight? Were you looking or expecting or anticipating we might vote on this tonight, or is this?
If we have language you're comfortable with, I'd recommend you vote and move it on. If you don't, then let's come back and make sure that it's
You won't be here.
what you'd like.
That's right.
I might listen in. You never know. I can't leave comments
You could
on the
tune
YouTube
in.
feed, so I might be less incentivized.
I don't want to beat a dead horse, so I'll let everybody else comment, but I just think that we need to, for those that don't have good judgment, just put something general in there that if it's not safe to land for houses, you don't land anytime unless it's an emergency.
Like just repeat what the state code says?
Yeah, that's my thought is if it currently exists in state code.
Reference the state code in there.
I don't know that we necessarily need
I
to
don't-
reference that,
I don't think you
it
need to.
exists and FAA code exists. So I don't know that it necessarily needs to be there. The avenue is there. If they're doing something unsafe when they're flying, it's through the FAA. If they're doing something hazardous in landing, it's in state code. Those avenues for enforcement are there. The enforcement is the challenge, you know, proving that and all of those things. But I don't know that this code necessarily needs to reflect all those things if they already exist.
Depends on if you want to be more strict.
And on that, I go back to, remember, we're looking globally, Cache County. You know, the actions that we take or we suggest to the council that they take have implications countywide as well.
Good. Any other thoughts?
Are there complaints on the other two airports? On the two other existing airports?
The other one is located well away from any properties intentionally. And it's from the first iteration of this code, and it's intentionally away from everybody. Because initially it was in his property, and part of another, but right next to all the homes. He moved it away from there, worked with the farmer, and it's fully away from everybody. There's no houses close to it. The closest one is probably several hundred, if not 1,000 feet. I can't remember the distance.
This one in Paradise.
Yes.
Right off the.
And then it's kind of on a bluff, and then it drops, and then down below there's a house. That's a different, anyway, I'll leave it at that.
And the other one?
And the other one is over
South
on the
side.
west side, Llanos Locados. That was the more recently approved
Yep.
airport, and the majority of that is on his property, including all zones and areas, with some small area that's not. And there are homes in that area, but not directly in those zones or areas.
So let me just go down the road just a little bit. A change in this code, it would be existing non-conforming use for that
New
airport,
application.
and before they can make any adjustments to anything on the property, they would have to secure, if we have this easement or ownership, they would have to secure that prior to making any adjustments to the CUP or the property.
Correct.
Okay.
So that use can continue for those previous approvals under the conditions and law that was in place at the time.
Okay.
Unless they amend it, then they have to meet all the new requirements.
My inclination would be to support the proposed language with the amendments that we've talked about tonight. That's the direction I'm leaning.
Commission, can I clarify that motion, if I may?
Oh, I didn't.
Not a
make
motion yet.
That was my inclination. I was making a motion. Eventually, I just wanted to say the direction I was leaning, and if the commission differs significantly, we can make another motion.
Okay. Well, and I'm mindful of our time and the number of items we still have left on our agenda tonight, so other thoughts? What would you like to do, commissioners?
I like the changes made that staff came up with. I'm comfortable.
Originally, or the additional buffer zone and that you just wrote in tonight?
No, I think that's covered by the state. I mean, and the enforcement, I get that the enforcement has not been there. And I guess.
We have that on all situations.
Yeah.
In the economy, social realm, you just can't please everything, but you certainly try.
So did you make a motion?
No.
Well, I'll make a motion that we refer to the county council this language for the final draft. With that you haven't read, without the additional buffer zoning that you tacked in tonight.
We made a change to the language regarding leases. Maybe we should read that first.
Okay.
I don't think the commission has looked at what change I made to that. Would that be helpful?
Yeah, go ahead.
So under location number 2, previously referenced, well, I'll just read it. The airport and the following must be located within the boundaries of property owned by the proponent, or that is within a recorded easement.
Yeah. That language.
Do we need more than
What
a
he said.
recorded easement? Do we need what that easement shall contain? And there are a lot of different types of easements.
So as follows would be all pertinent uses and structures and all zones and areas related to the land use and associated with required design criteria specified by as follows. So that gives you some additional piece that everything must be and meet those requirements. You could stipulate some additional pieces on the easement. You could specify time, but I don't think that's appropriate.
No.
You could specify, maybe you're saying that we need to add some more specifics outside of A and B under number 2?
What I'm just saying is what the easement should, I mean, there's an easement, but it could be an easement to cross the property, it could be an easement to, flood it or, something like that. I think it needs to be specific to what they're doing, would be planning, taking off, flying over.
It could be any of those.
If the recorded easement allows.
Flying over, I wouldn't account for, but any land use specific to, and see, that's why it's specific on B, all zones and areas related to land use. Because that's what we're accounting for. We're not dealing with approach areas. We're not dealing with those things that are above ground.
If you're okay with it and council's okay with it, I'm good. I just wonder
I
if
think
that's.
that's a good question. I don't know if there needs to be more there. I'm curious to hear what everyone else has to say too.
I'm okay with the changes as proposed.
Is it necessary to include this line that I've just highlighted? I know the word proximate is not preferred.
It's not, we decided is in the state code already, it's already enforceable.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think that's.
It's not necessary. You don't feel they need to be more restrictive.
This part.
Okay.
So is my proposal.
Jason, you didn't feel like we needed to reference necessarily that state code?
No, I don't think so. I think it exists. There's an avenue for people to take action if there's a problem. I think we're good.
Okay.
But we would remove those lines. Right.
I'm going to delete that piece. And everything you see on the screen now then is what, if you take action today, would be forwarded to the county council.
That's my proposal.
Your motion? I second the motion.
So we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so this is a recommendation that goes to the county council, okay? And so please plan to attend their meeting as well and restate or renew your concerns, and perhaps further changes can be made. Okay? All right. Good luck.
It will be noticed.
Yes, they're typically the second and fourth Tuesdays of every month. Go to the county website and confirm what those dates are. I can't remember off the top of my head what those dates are. And sometimes they flex if there's holidays, so it's good to just check and see when they're holding them. They should be noticed, and so you'll know if it's on that agenda, or you can call our office to confirm if that's happening. But we'll try to get it on for their next, they'll set the hearing, and then they would hold the hearing at their subsequent meeting.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, the next item on our agenda is in regards to amending use-related definitions, 4100 recreational facilities. Looks like Tim's going to be giving us a report.
Yep.
Take it away.
We had a little warm-up on this item in the joint council commission meeting. And so I thought it'd be helpful to put a kind of a broad zoning map of the county, generally showing the A10 zone in yellow throughout the valley area, between communities. And then you see in the green, either public lands or the FR40, applicable more to mountain benches and the predominant mountainous areas. So when we look at the definition of recreation use, it's helpful to keep this context in mind and imagine the A10 zone as many different farms, many different residential areas, some adjacent to communities, some remote from communities, but nonetheless a broad area throughout the valley of Cache County. So with that reference in mind, staff has prepared two options for the Commission's consideration to recommend to Council. Option one is to surgically remove campground, if I could say that. How about precisely? Well, how about just
It
remove?
wasn't a reference to you, by the way.
Just to remove.
Trying to expand your resume repertoire?
Yeah, sure.
Surgically remove things?
Just trying to keep the commission awake right now. It's working.
Thank you for that.
Yep. Recreation facility would remain as currently defined, and I'll just add, as we see up here on the board, that there's quite a bit that's allowed and quite a bit that's not specifically defined. And so in addition to a recreation use, there could be incidental lodging of up to 15 rooms, and that's sleeping areas and rooms that share a common kitchen area. So that's fairly substantial in terms of the potential for that type of facility. That is, again, incidental to the primary recreational use. And really the definition of the examples of definition is that line that's been crossed out at the bottom where it says the term recreation facility includes but is not limited to the following. And it states ski facility and golf course and campground. Well, many more different types of recreation facilities could be considered in A10 and FR40 zones. But this proposal is just to state that a recreation facility does not include use type 4110 campground. And so really to remove recreation facility, there needs to be a specific definition of campground that would be tied to the use table. And so the proposal here, or the option here, is to remove campground definition from general definitions and move it to the use-related definitions. I will point out that the current definition states 3 or more campsites, and based on current understanding of state code and when a public water system and such kicks in, it's 2 or more. So we thought that it'd be appropriate to reference that. And then for the schedule of uses by zoning district, add the use 4110 campground and allow it conditionally only in FR40 and recreation, forest recreation. Now, the commission in previous discussion has explored the idea of not necessarily doing away with all possibilities of a future recreation facility campground in the valley, but that there could be study and exploration for appropriate standards that could apply to a potential overlay zone, right? And so that's mostly been discussed in context of campground, but perhaps that overlay zone is campground and other types of recreation facilities that may have fairly significant impacts, and the appropriate locations of those, the spacing, the distance, the traffic impacts and such could be looked at and tied to a overlay zone. So just share that as a possible future action or course of study and potential action. And then also in previous discussions, we've explored the potential for very light application of maybe one dry campground site for as maybe part of agritourism use, but understanding that agritourism needs more of a comprehensive look to address other types of appropriate incidental business and recreation activities appropriate to enhance and diversify farming operations in A10 zones and RR zones. So this is option one, and just to note that realize that the adding changes to the definitions would require additional notice, therefore continuation or tabling of this item and a renotice to include a potential amendment to use-related definitions. That's the first option, yes.
The RR zone again?
Resort recreation.
Oh, I'm sorry, that's.
Resort recreation.
Yep, resort recreation, so yes, FR40 and RR, and I may have mix those terms up. So thank you for.
What was the last thing you said, Tim, about additional noticing and stuff?
Just that the notice for this public hearing was specific to the schedule of uses and the definition of 4100 recreation facility, but did not cite section 170740 definitions, so we would need to renotice to include definitions.
Okay. Okay, so you're not expecting action tonight, but
No.
some feedback.
Well, sure, unless the commission felt inclined towards option 2, which would not require any further noticing and rescheduling the meeting.
All right, thank you.
So I'll just go over option 2, which would be simply to amend the recreation facility specific to the schedule of uses and have it be not permitted in A10, not permitted in commercial, but permitted in FR 40 and RR resort recreation zones. And again, this could be followed by future action and exploration of an overlay zone and amendment and comprehensive review of the agritourism use definition. So happy to discuss this and explore which direction the commission would like to go. And
I'll start, if you don't mind, Mr. Watterson. I know you have some thoughts. Just real quick, you know, when I first read this, my question was, why not make it conditional in the commercial zone or whatever? Because, you know, for the most part, an applicant would have to go through a rezone process first before, you know, to rezone from A10 or whatever existing zone there is to commercial. And so, you have thoughts on that, Tim?
yes, the reason that was placed there is because of the very limited amount of commercial zone in the county, unincorporated area.
Exactly.
And that it seems that if there is a potential future overlay zone, that might be the better way to address more specifically recreation.
Okay.
And currently, the draft of the general plan does not contemplate substantial increase of commercial areas. Those are looked to be more services in the cities and communities.
Yeah. There might be a perspective from the commission, though, that, you know, rezoning to commercial is a pretty onerous process to begin with, and so, you know, less likely to pass potentially for that reason. But
And gives you the latitude to
the
say this doesn't
campground
meet,
pulls out,
meet the
too many
the
options.
character of the area.
yeah, yeah. Anyway, just a question or thought I had. So
Yeah.
That's exactly my thoughts.
Hey, I'm anxious to hear everybody else's opinions or thoughts, but I personally am not ready to make a decision tonight based on our earlier meeting. I mean, I'd like more detail, more options. But does somebody need to make a motion, like we learned in that training that we had earlier this spring, that for the next 6 months or whatever, this is kind of on? Huh?
We already did.
Last meeting, or tonight?
Two meetings, or?
So that's in force, okay, good.
Yeah, it's in force.
Yes. And I think just noting that the time and effort to thoroughly research and feel that an overlay zone is adequately vetted and it's about place, it's about limitations and understanding the context. So that's a long process that we don't feel we could spend the time right away.
I still feel that we may want to consider two size, like we mentioned earlier, whatever that magic number is, 8 or 10 spaces, you know, might be this route. Above that might be another route, I don't know.
Like
Huh?
a single septic or.
Yeah,
septic
well,
system.
just thinking like if we got an ag operation or, you know, a small hunting club such as White's, or, you know, we had the summers out there with the elk deal, something like that come in 8 to 10 or whatever meets. I'd be more in favor of looking at something like that versus a big, or two, you know, look at them two different ways or 3 different ways.
So just to clarify, I think what I heard, well, there's a trigger, and that is that 2 or more camp sites in a campground triggers a public water system. And then in addition to that, more than, I think it was about 18 to 20 campsites would trigger a larger septic or state-reviewed permit septic system or sewer.
If it was over 5,000 gallons, then it goes state, and they figured it's about 125 gallons per unit, so that's like 40-something stalls.
Right, but then still, whether it's 2 or more, that public water system standard kicks in. And so it seems that the 8 to 10, maybe I'm not recalling how that 8 to 10 fits into the discussion for the RV campground. I recall.
It may not, it was just simply a,
Okay.
I don't know, because like we have the dogs, but if you've got up to 6, you're okay, but if you have more than that, then you can have up to another level, but you got to do a sound deal at the property line
And yet the state's requirement for 2 or more, and the water system for 2 or more is pretty expensive to do.
Maybe
for
it's not
only
feasible
8
then.
or 10 units.
And Brady, I will add that maybe it's worth just reading this proposed amendment to the definition of campground. So it was changed from 3 to 2 campsites in those zones. And then at the end, it states water and sewage facilities shall comply with state requirements. And that's just an awareness statement, and then a reference to 171040 where it states that all state codes are followed.
I do think that's an improvement for sure.
Sure. And maybe that would be more applicable to an A10 then. If it was, I don't know if how the fellow commissioners feel about that, but maybe if, because, I mean, I don't know what whites are zoned out there, and like if you guys in Benson wanted to do something, you're not gonna be an FR40, but are you an RR? No. So that might be where that might be more applicable, even though they still gotta do a water deal. We can't change that, that's state mandated. But is it worth considering, you know, on a smaller scale, would we look at it or allow it in an A10?
And that's where the agritourism opportunity lies, is to look at that comprehensively and perhaps allow something like this that's incidental to a farm. It increases some revenue and some tourism to come and participate in U-Pick or wagon rides, whatever. And but the state regulation is that 1 dry campsite per parcel before public water system kicks in. So if a farm had more than 1 parcel, they could potentially have more than 1 site. But if it was 1 parcel, then it'd be one campsite.
Okay.
I'd like to make a distinction between maybe part of these decisions or what's happening, what's gonna happen short-term and what's more of a long-term piece. So the long-term discussion, I feel like, is what you're touching on now. What are we doing with agritourism? What are we doing with these zones? Those are months-long discussions.
Yes.
It should take 6 months to a year, I'm guessing, to work through. If there's a need for a short-term solution, then that's the question I would ask is there a need for a short-term solution, and then what would it be? Option 2 isn't a short-term solution from my perspective, that's a longer process. Option 1 is the short-term solution that says, we're gonna just address campgrounds, that's it. As a recreational facility, pull it out, so that there isn't additional conflicts with residences adjacent to municipalities, and allowing those in the A10 zone. Is that a good use in the A10 zone? That's the question. Is it a better use in the forest recreation zone? So I would like to maybe ask, is there a distinction the commission would like to make between short and long-term approaches? Do we need to act quickly with the short-term action, or do we just need to pursue the long-term action?
I guess that's the real question, and one that I go back to is how much, how big of an issue is this? I mean, are we going to have an RV park on every corner in the valley? I don't necessarily see that as being an imminent hazard to the county. Maybe so. I don't know how many applications we've received since the initial one. Do we have other applications in the pipe?
There were calls to explore.
Calls but no applications.
Correct. And in
But
some
they can't
cases, when those
apply.
calls came, we shared that the county was applying for this code amendment.
That's what I was gonna say.
Yeah.
Maybe we should hear what the public has to say, that's the few that's here, and then think on it.
Yeah, I have a couple of thoughts, and I'll come to you, Nolan. I haven't forgot. But Jason, I think you started to make some comments.
My thought on this is to your point on the commercial, to me, that's a process that, I mean, if we counted the number of commercial properties within the county or parcels, it's, a couple of hands probably where we have those. And the possibility that they go this direction, I think is small. I think leaving commercial as an option, people would have to go through a rezone process, and that might motivate us to get an overlay zone taken care of quicker.
Okay. What I'd like to do before Nolan gives his comments, we're coming up on 8 o'clock, so I think before we open the public hearing, we'll probably need to extend our meeting time. Given the number of agenda items that we have remaining, I would suggest we go to at least 8:30, and so allow commissioners to make a motion in that regard, or even longer if necessary, so.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we extend the meeting to 8:30.
I'll second that.
Okay, motion and second to extend the meeting at least till 8:30. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, Nolan?
I was just going to point out that Matt was going to make a comment as we were discussing on some things.
Okay.
I'll figure it out later. I was just wondering what the 2 was for, if it's for undeveloped sites, dry sites, those types of things. When you guys were mentioning 2, I know a lot of times we refer to RV, but just wanted to make sure we were clear on a campground, a campsite. I mean, when does that 2 kick in? Do they have, if I have a FR40 zone and I have a little spot over here for one tent, a little spot over here for another tent with a campfire ring, does that classify as 2? Just so that I can look, I can research.
I mean, to your point, I mean, you can think of Blacksmith Fork Canyon and hundreds of spots that exist up and down that canyon that probably would fall into this.
Yeah. Yeah, good points. Okay.
Maple Rise, yeah.
Any other questions or comments, or should we open the public hearing?
I make a motion to open the public hearing for the use, is that the use-related definitions, 4100 recreational facility.
Perfect. Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion and second to open the public hearing regarding amendments to the use-related definitions, 4100 recreational facility. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, would anyone like to make any comments on this item tonight? If so, please come on up. If not,
It's your chance.
we're happy to move along.
Ted Stokes. I appreciate the thought that's gone into trying to put a policy in place that's compliant with the public. Obviously, over this experience, we've had thousands of people objecting and one person wanting, and typically, politicians try to put their policy in line with the public. That's your constituents, your voters. Obviously, you guys aren't politicians. You guys are appointed, but this is going to eventually get to the council, who are politicians and who will approve what their constituents want. And so I appreciate that the policy that it looks like we're trying to accomplish by this is to eliminate the ability for these large RV campsites to be bordering municipalities. And that's the policy that it looks like it's trying to accomplish. And I just appreciate the thought from you guys and from the council and from the staff in trying to accomplish that policy that obviously the public has wanted.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you. Any other comments? Are you sure? Okay. All right.
I'd like a motion to close the public hearing. I'll second that.
A motion and second to close the public hearing. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, we've closed the public hearing. Sounds like, if I understand correctly, commissioners are leaning towards option 1, which is going to require some additional noticing, potentially as a short-term fix. I mean, I guess I should say that that's my thinking. There are longer-term items that we've been discussing or that have been suggested. And so this is not going to be the last time we talk about this, I'm sure.
So the motion that was made a couple of meetings ago, how does it carry? Do we want to put something more into this, or that's,
I think the point,
if we're gonna continue talking about it, I'd like to finalize some of this stuff if we're not gonna
Sure.
finalize it tonight, so.
I think from what I understand from staff, is that if we're leaning towards option one, which I sensed we are, it involves changes to use-related definition, 1707-030, 4110 campground. Those recommendations were not noticed for this meeting, and so we need to re-notice. If that's the way we're going, if that's the direction we're going, as opposed to option two, it'll come up at our next meeting, if I'm not mistaken. Does that sound right, Tim?
That's right. And I'll just add for clarity that both options, 1 and 2, contemplate the work eventually towards an overlay zone and the comprehensive amendment of agritourism.
Yeah. Let's see, and I think, am I right that the, so application was received for this ordinance amendment on February 10th. So there is kind of a timeline from within which we need to operate. Is that correct? Is it 6 months?
If you hit 6 months and you haven't taken action, then the current ordinance would be applicable if someone applied.
6 months is the next meeting?
Yeah.
Or am I wrong about that?
But I think we meet August 4th,
Yep.
Yeah.
and that deadline is August 10th.
So that would expire at that point.
Okay.
Yeah, our meeting's August.
So it needs to be on the next meeting agenda, or as part of our special meeting coming up, if that's not enough.
I'd keep that meeting open, just for
workshop.
I'm gonna speculate, though.
Open
Commissioners aren't gonna be real excited about another special meeting if we can't do it at the next regularly scheduled meeting, so.
They say in option one,
I wouldn't
would
say
require an additional public hearing.
Correct.
the application, the inquiries for potential applications came about 5 months ago, and we haven't heard many lately.
Okay. Okay, well, we don't want things to expire under our noses, so, sounds like, we can, hopefully finalize this and make a decision at our next meeting, if I'm not mistaken.
Need a motion to push that to the next meeting?
I don't know that we need a motion.
The option that I would support would be option 2 and striking commercial zones from that, and just remove it from A10 from recreation use.
What do commissioners feel? Would you rather go option 2, make a decision tonight?
The only, how hard would it be though if we decide for like, or is it a total separate discussion? So if the ag-related or agritourism, if we decide we want to allow, say even 8 in a A10, how hard is that to amend this after we push it this way?
Well, I think as Chris has indicated in previous discussions, that's a likely follow-up step after the general plan is adopted, and that there are several opportunities to explore with that. There are some policy recommendations in the general plan that really encourage a fair amount of exploration of what the possibilities are to support farming. And so it's about identifying those opportunities, clearly defining them, and it will take some time and study, but I think the intention is within several months to a year after the general plan is adopted.
So in staff's expert opinion, what do you suggest we do?
Whatever you want. That's the expert opinion. It comes back to that short and long-term question for me. So I don't think there's been the legwork or research done to support a long-term action at present.
Yeah.
I think that there has been the discussion had to support a short-term action. But it's, if you're all on board with what that is. So I would hesitate to recommend pursuing a long-term action. I would highly hesitate to adopt any sort of amendment to zoning at present. I think that would be a poor decision until the general plan is concluded and it's part of that broader discussion. Because you'll be amending that in the next 6 months.
So which option again is short-term?
Option one.
Option one.
Okay.
If you like it. I mean, you can tweak it, adjust it, whatever you want to do with it.
But it still needs to be noticed.
How is option two not short term?
So if we're going to, well, it's back to, let me go back to that. I thought option two had a piece tied to it about overlay zoning. Is that just what you stipulate or said, and not what?
I just mentioned that would be a follow-up step,
I see. I see.
along with agritourism as longer-term steps.
Yeah, the only thing I have an issue with is that I like the use-related definitions change under option one.
I prefer that. I don't like removing all the current existing recreational facilities that are already in the A10 and making them all non-conforming uses. That's most of your uses that are recreational facilities are in the A10 zone. What would be helpful is if when we're drafting the agritourism piece, that's when all that stuff shifts. And we identify a place where those belong rather than just making them legal non-conforming. Then when you have the Mickles come back or someone else that has one of these ag uses, all of a sudden they can't amend their use without, they're just stuck. They're immediately stuck in space. And if you want to cause a stir, that's the way to do it. Because that'll go straight to the council and back to us, to you. So I understand the hesitation with that, and I would hesitate to approach option two with that. And also with the commercial being removed, I don't see a need to make that not permitted. That's already a intensified use. I think it's highly unlikely someone's going to put recreation there, and if they did, it wouldn't impact anybody if they did. I just don't see an impact there to make that change. Anyway, I misunderstood Tim, so I apologize on the overlay zoning. But I think option one is a better option just because of the fact that it's specific to campgrounds, which is what's driving that issue. If we're going to delve into the other pieces, it's a much broader discussion. But like I told Brady, it's whatever you feel is the correct answer, is the right answer.
Yeah, I mean, I'm personally leaning towards option one. And so would like to see it come back at our next meeting for a vote. Others feel similar or feel different?
Option one sounds good to me at this point.
Linda?
I'm good with option one.
Brendan, you too? Brady, Lane?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't
Okay,
support
Jason?
it. No, I don't support it, but that's okay.
Okay. Okay. So I don't believe we need to take a vote on it tonight, but we'll anticipate it'll be on next month's agenda with the proper noticing, and we'll come back to option one and see if we can pass those changes.
Are there any proposed amendments if there are certain specifics?
So I would still raise the issue in the commercial zone, and the kind of comments that I'm hearing are related to existing commercial zones, and that's not my concern at all. But it would be, you know, to me, a large campground facility, it's a commercial use. It looks like, smells like, feels like commercial use. So it would be okay in a commercial zone, in my opinion. And rezoning properties in the valley to commercial is very difficult and challenging. And so it would have to be the perfect spot for commercial use to be approved. That's kind of my feeling on it. But otherwise, I like the changes that I'm seeing in option one. So.
Yeah,
I still come back to my concern is, it seems that we're making a knee-jerk reaction to one proposal, and that we're yanking a use out of the zone because of one unpopular proposal. And I don't like that type of precedent, because then it's a storage unit in a commercial zone. Oh, we can't have that here. And basically what it says is, if we fill the room with people, then we can just pull the use out of a zone. And, I think we spent a lot of time working on putting these zones together and what made sense. Can we make adjustments? Yes, but I don't like the precedent that we're setting by just yanking a zone because of one unpopular proposal.
Yeah, that's a great point. And either option does that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
And I do think staff looked at it from the standpoint of, where does it make sense for a campground to exist? Just period, just broad question, where does it make sense? A10 zone? Well, not really. Recreational zone? Maybe, maybe not. I mean, recreational makes more sense. So I think from that standpoint, where is it most appropriately served based on how our zones are identified? What's the primary use in ag? Ag. What's the primary use in recreational zone? Recreation. That's a much better fit. And so I think from that standpoint, that's staff's approach, is where does it fit? Not maybe specific to that use, but we recognize there was a conflict with, again, one of the uses we allow in the A10 zone that isn't directly in line with A10. But agritourism might fit there. That's where we have this funny break of what we call recreational facility and what's agritourism. They're kind of the same thing.
Okay.
So maybe to your point, where you say, having it in the commercial zone, I mean, someone could ask for a rezone on their property to the RR zone.
True.
Right?
Absolutely.
And then they could, and that would be almost
Yes.
like our overlay, that would have the same effect as like an overlay zone.
The recreation resort is much higher.
You have to have 2,000 acres. You have to build a golf
It's a
course.
much higher bar too.
That bar is extremely high.
My bad. All right, never mind.
Oh,
That was a
that's
fair
a good
assessment.
question,
That
though.
zone is-
Okay.
Yep, very good question. Okay, everybody comfortable moving forward to our next agenda item,
Yes.
which is the Hollow Ridge RV Campground Conditional Use Permit. We gonna have a staff report on that, I assume?
Yes, so just a brief summary of where this is at, and the appeal filed on February 3rd. Excuse me, no, it was approved with conditions on February 3rd, and an appeal February 17th was filed, and then it went to Board of Adjustments on May 19th. And what you're looking at here is the final decision, written decision by the Board of Adjustments. And it states that this is the Cache County Board of Adjustment remands the Hollow Ridge RV Campground CUP back to the Planning Commission to address any and all inconsistencies between the CUP and the state administrative rules applicable to recreational vehicle park sanitation, and it cites the state rule associated with that. I would just like to point out some of the changes, the recommended amendments to the CUP to address that requirement from the Board of Adjustment, and point out that the specific rule is cited throughout the staff report in addition to state code requirements. As staff, we felt that it was consistent to cite that specific rule as well as state code requirements. So all apply. And where the staff report did refer to any potable water and water supply that we noted that must meet the state code requirements, sewer hookups designed to state code requirements, that's in the findings of fact. There is a finding of fact, I think it's a C18, where it gets more specific, where in the original CUP or existing CUP, it states and cites the waste disposal or drainage specifically. And here's the most detailed amendment specific to administrative rules applicable to recreational vehicle park sanitation, and that are 392-301, and it's attached. Require access to or development of a public water system and a wastewater system meeting specific plumbing code and environmental quality health development standards. So again, we're broadening it beyond the R 392-301. And furthermore, that county code states that water and sewage facilities shall comply with the requirements of Bear River Health Department, Utah Department of Environmental Quality, Office of State Water Engineer. And these agencies shall be considered the county experts in evaluating proposed sewage and culinary water supply system. Then it refers to condition 5, which states that the site plan and associated drawings and documents must show compliance with the state administrative rules to meet required public water system and wastewater system standards as administered by applicable state agencies. State permits approving public water and wastewater system must be submitted with the site plan prior to approval of the site plan. And in addition, the applicant provided amended letter of intent as well as rules that address the reverses what was previously stated, that there would be no on-site dumping, and now states that the water and the wastewater would be consistent and compliant with state codes. So staff's recommendation is that these amendments apply to fulfill the mandate of the Board of Adjustments. We did receive a comment earlier today from the appellants, and they have suggestions for perhaps where additional references in the CUP might be amended. It appears that there might be some items perhaps outside of the scope of the mandate from the Board of Adjustments, and so we've not had extensive time to review this, but just noting that this was placed in the Planning Commission folder this afternoon. And that's a summary of what the commission could consider as action today.
Thanks, Tim. Any questions or comments for Tim? Commissioners?
From the Board of Adjustments, these were the recommendations that they made after whatever went into the Board of Adjustments.
Correct.
Right there, that final decision.
Yeah, so it's, so by re-examining this, we can just, if we went with those stipulations, we know we've complied with the state.
Correct.
Can I just bring up a standard point? You know, I know we gave some specific conditions on this one, but I wonder if our staff report shouldn't have a general requirement that the applicant meet all applicable state and federal standards.
That's just a given. Yeah,
I know, but it just seems like this is, you know, we end up at the Board of Adjustments on these. This could be a recurring theme. You know, we can't, I mean, we do our best, staff does their best to cover everything, but we're not gonna catch everything that's out there.
I agree.
The only problem that I see though is if a person goes, like, if this wouldn't have been appealed, it would have never been brought to our attention, most likely.
We'd already identified it as staff.
You identified it? Okay.
I didn't,
So that's the only thing I was
Can't
just
recall
saying
anything
is,
like that.
or thinking is, if we give them a checklist, which may never happen, but if we give them a checklist and they do it, and then they find out afterward, well, they're still.
But we also put things in there that you need to comply with the Bear River Health Department requirements. You know, we leave some of this conditions open. We're not going to specify exactly what a septic system has to be because that's not under our purview. That's the health department, and so we give them, you know, we give a general. You need to provide whatever based on health department requirements, state law.
But the health department's gonna make sure they do that. Are we gonna?
Yeah.
I just don't know. The only worry I have is who's gonna represent the state, or who's you gonna require them to go to the state?
And on this specific issue, it would be the health department, correct?
we tend to try to be specific to the context. So if we know there's a specific state or county law that is just on the books, we don't have to make a condition for it, but we might put it in there just as a reminder if it's contextually applicable. If it's not contextually applicable, I would avoid just putting blanket statements in. We try to move away from that type of thing because it just clutters up what we're trying to convey.
And citations change and.
Things change and adjust. I think in this case, staff was very supportive of this coming back to the commission to clarify that condition. Because even though the state already said those things and we would have to comply with the state rules before they would supersede the county's condition, it was more clear to have on the record that that had been adopted and that would be required.
I do agree with that. I agree with that.
Just to clean the record, I think that was helpful.
And just to clarify, it was in following the CUP approval, additional steps were taken by the applicant to meet with Beaver Health Department, and that's when coordination between those engineers, environmental engineers, and our staff became more aware of these requirements.
Okay, any other questions, comments for Tim?
So as we go down here with the letter of intent, so the applicant has said, yeah, we'll comply with all of these additional things that came out of that.
Correct.
So looks to me like we've covered all the bases that were brought up to the board.
Okay, any other thoughts, commissioners? If none, what would you like to do?
What are we looking for?
We recommend this back to the council then?
We're just going over the one requirement.
The final.
Oh, okay, because we're just approving this conditional use.
Yep.
You're just taking, it's like a new action.
Yeah.
Conditions.
So a motion would look like we move to approve the Hollow Ridge RV campground conditional use permit with the amendment.
16 conditions and.
Yes, I would.
The amended 16 conditions and how many?
2.
2 conclusions.
Conclusions. I'll make that my motion.
Sorry, I know this is no, but I just wanted to ask, is it at all possible that?
Can you let them finish their motion and maybe, when it's discussion, that would be probably appropriate. I'm sorry.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
So a motion and second to recommend approval. To approve, I'm sorry. Hollow Ridge RV Campground conditional use permit based on the amended 16 conditions and 2 conclusions. Any further discussion?
Before the vote is made?
What's that?
May we be heard before the vote is taken?
The commission hasn't asked for public comment, so.
I understand, but as your comment, I think you would be appropriate.
I don't think so. That's okay.
Particularly what I have placed with record with the recommendation.
Any interest in that, commissioners?
I think what's important too is the decision from the board suggested or demanded that the entire statute be applied, but there's a few parts of the statute that haven't been implemented into the conditional use permit that we'd like to bring to your attention, so you comply with the Board of Adjustments. We don't want this to go back to the Board of Adjustments. We want it done here. But if you guys don't apply the entire statute, it is gonna have to go back to the Board of Adjustments. So there's a few things that are missing that they didn't do.
Counselor, would you like to?
State law is applicable to this situation, whether or not it's in the conditional use permit or not. Chris just talked about that in the past, that a few moments ago, that even if a conditional use permit doesn't include other statutes like fire protection or, there's a whole host of state statutes that would apply in this situation but are not mentioned here in the conditional use permit. So,
But the language says to address any and all inconsistencies. And that's all we're asking the commission to do, is to address any and all inconsistencies in accordance with what the Board of Adjustments asked you to do.
Yeah. And we feel like that's what's happened, so there's a difference of opinion. I understand that.
If you give us 5 minutes, it would allow us to avoid
if the commission wants to make further changes to this, they can make a motion to have you come and comment. Right now, I'm not hearing that there's.
I just wanted to let you know that we had a few things we wanted to say. I'm not trying to be abrasive. I just wanted to.
Understand.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Counselor.
I don't have anything else to say.
Okay. Commissioners, we have a motion and a second.
I just had one question.
Any further discussion?
Yeah, so we got this at the beginning of the meeting. or
Yes.
It was dropped in there. Have we covered everything? Is it?
I think we've been given an opinion by council that we're covered.
I'm ready to vote.
Any further discussion, commissioners? Okay, all those in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. The motion carries. And our next item on the agenda is items 9 through 12. Discussion items. In order to cover those, we're going to have to extend the meeting again.
How much time do we need to cover those?
How much time you need, Tim?
Well, I would say for the next item, it could be 5 minutes. A little bit of a FYI update, and then the other items.
11's also an FYI.
Let's say 15 minutes total.
15 minutes total. Chairman, I move that we extend the meeting 20 minutes.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a
Second.
We have a motion and a second to extend the meeting another 20 minutes. So to 8:50. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. Monticello Meadows subdivision, Tim.
All right. So the purpose of this update is to provide the commission with some recent study and understanding of road requirements specific to a parcel proposed for subdivision under the A10 zone. And I just need to turn off the zoning, which is quite apparent there as the A10 zone. Where is it?
Right there.
There we go. All right. So this is a 36-acre parcel, and it looks like I just lost my map. But at any rate, you saw it, and what I'm going to do now is go to the kind of preliminary plat for the subdivision, which shows 3 lots plus an ag remainder. You see a lot fronting the road, and what you're seeing is a road alignment. This more cornered turn is the existing alignment. However, to meet the road standards for this particular road classification of a minor collector, I believe. Yep, minor collector, a different horizontal curve profile would be required to meet the speed requirements and standards. However, what we're finding is that a slight extension of that road to that standard wouldn't necessarily yield a substantial gain in terms of public benefit for getting another, 6, 7, I forget the distance, but a distance further at this time wouldn't necessarily benefit the public when a much greater distance in the future is needed to extend that Meridian Road. So as you can see here to the north, there's a proposed private road to access the 3 lots. And so what I'd like to do is turn some time over to Matt. I just, by way of introduction, just share that our road manual, our subdivision code references roads, that they shall be designed and constructed in accordance with the specifications found in Title 12. Here's Title 12, and in Title 12, you see direct reference to our road manual. And you also see reference to fee in lieu of required improvements. So that is an option for subdivision applicant to pay a fee in lieu that could be applied to the future construction of a more complete and longer road improvement. So with that, I'll turn some time over to Matt to further comment on how this could work.
Is this in Sterling area? Is that?
Yes.
Just off Pisgah Road.
I'll get it back up here.
So as you go north up to 2400 Meridian, that's just, as you go up the Dugway there, it's just to the north of that.
Can I get that parcel number one more time? 011.
I don't have anything on it either.
All of the, yeah, there are just certain ones I don't have access. Okay.
I can see it as soon as I say that.
I just assumed there wasn't one.
Oh, this one, I don't know.
Okay, that was what I was wondering.
That's your question, sorry, I misunderstood you.
But the last one, I couldn't see.
But just tell us one more time, Matt, before you share with us, why are we discussing this one more time?
Why we're discussing this is because the road manual says that no development can occur on any substandard road in the county, and that the developer is required to improve the road along the frontage of his property. So when Tim was zoomed in there on one of his maps, you realize that even the slightest improvement to this is going to require, Tim, no, I'm not very good on yours.
We might just need to use that. Just disconnect from that for now, Tim, and use the desktop.
So what the question comes down to is kind of as a concept to bring before you guys tonight, is to find out what your comfort level is with moving forward with subdivisions in this type of situation. So right now the pavement ends right at the start of the curve. So the very north of that curve is where the pavement ends. The rest of that is dirt. Those curves don't meet even our very minimum standards, but because of the classification of this, because of the development is pushing it out, now we're getting more and more of these types of road improvements. So in order for them to bring the road to meet standards, they're going to have to go, it's going to affect the property next to them and the property. So now we're starting to expand these improvements where we don't just have straight little county roads where they're improving just their frontage. We're starting to see these move onward. So Tim did mention the fee in lieu of, and so if I can just read the first paragraph of fee in lieu, it says, where present conditions exist that make it unfeasible or impractical to install any required public improvements at the time of subdivision or development, the director of the Public Works Department or the designee or director's designee may require the subdivider or developer to pay to the county a fee equal to the estimated cost of such improvements. So there's a way for our code that we could still move forward with the development. They would pay the county a certain portion of what it's going to require to improve that road along their frontage. But we're also burdening, you know, if we just do it along their frontage, now whose responsibility is it to go get the easements on the McBride's piece? You know, do we have to eminent domain that? Are we going to be back through another process? So this is kind of a good time to get you guys' feelings, your opinions. The other one is, the burden of cost, right? There's a cost estimate that I don't know if you guys got, but generally just the engineering cost to do the road improvements, all the road improvements that would be required, even land acquisition if possible, is about $360,000 to build the road, put all the fill in, do land acquisitions and those types of things. So just kind of, you're seeing what the costs could be for the whole project, and so when the couple that you see in the back of the room, Jake and Tammy, have come in, for their subdivision, we really need some direction on how you guys would like to proceed, where you guys feel comfortable approving these subdivisions, and making sure, you know, Taylor's been in our meetings to try to make sure that we're not exacting, those types of things. And before this comes back for subdivision approval, we thought, hey, let's bring this for conceptual, get your feelings so that when you come back and see those conditions, that everyone's comfortable with the route that staff took.
I'd like to throw just one thing onto this, not necessarily the general, but if there are safety concerns, I wonder if we should have some language in there that, you know, either puts that on you or that we have an out there, so we don't just say we're going to accept this if there's an imminent danger hazard that could, you know, I think that's something that needs to be addressed. Well, one way or another.
And then Tim said 5 minutes, so I apologize for that. But before Jake and Tammy purchased this property, the county was already looking at these corners because they do not meet county standards. There has been several accidents there. It's gravel. It's hard to maintain. So you have something that the county may have on a capital improvement plan or that has been working on. You have a developer coming in. You know, just trying to sort all these things out through the land use, through the code. It's not always easy for staff. There isn't always a very clear direction. You know, there's always the option of no, right? Is that, so do we say, hey, no, not until the county does all these improvements, you can't develop, or hey, we're willing to for a 3-lot subdivision, you know, you're getting the fee in lieu of, so just really direction and guidance on staff's decisions and those conditions. And I think that in our meeting with Chris and Tim and Taylor and everyone and Tammy and Jake, we felt like that this was a good place to kind of get some direction on how to move forward.
The price you quoted, the $360,000, is that just for the improvements along their frontage, or is that bigger?
He said land acquisition.
That's everything. Rumor mill is that the McBrides to the north are not really, you know, they're not going to just sell their land, so.
Okay.
That's the southern extent of the property, correct?
The McBrides are on the north of the proposed
But the
development.
improvements would be to the southern.
Improvements go to the south end of the subject property, correct?
Yes, so those, I was hoping maybe the engineer would break the costs out for overall and what the cost would be just across their frontage.
I see.
They didn't do that. Generally, they said all the earthwork was on their property. So their first few line items, Angie at the top, most of the earthwork is on Schellenberg's property. Yeah, but generally most of that is on, if you look at the bottom, the land acquisition, that 109,000 that they've given it $2.50 a square foot, that's none of their property. That's all McBride. So the substantial cost in this is land acquisition. There is, I mean, you're raising the road 10 plus feet, you're building a whole new cross section, you're vacating, you know, your old existing right of way. But as we move further and further out of, you know, our square grids, this is what we're going to end up with. So we need to make sure we're either telling people no or yes, or using the fee in lieu of, and but that is putting burden, you know, on the county, right? If we give them a fee in lieu, now that comes back to capital improvements. Does that mean more staff? Does that mean
In 12 years, right?
Yep.
And what happens to the cost during the time that you do a fee in lieu,
Correct.
and does that
Correct.
cost creep that
Correct.
we're seeing now happen?
Is the fee in lieu is basically everything that's, well,
the fee in lieu would be the stuff that's on their property.
on their property,
Yep.
which is $290,000 worth of it, right? Or no?
Generally, that's how the code reads. When in the road manual, I had it pulled up a second ago, but it says that the developer is required for the right-of-way dedication and everything along their frontage.
Yeah.
And then it talks about the access road to it, so.
My point being that the proponents would be responsible for that part, the county potentially responsible for the rest.
Yeah.
The land acquisition, that wouldn't be on
land,
them, that
right.
would be on the county.
It could go one of three ways. In our meeting, we discussed, you just say, no, now's not the right time for development, right? The other one would be that 100% of that 300 is on them, and if they can go out and purchase land, they can get it acquired by whatever means, whether it costs them a little more. I mean, we're given typical prices. Or, you know, your third one is that, hey, we feel like that this is something, you know, a capital type improvement. If you guys are willing to put the money up for your share of property, you know, it should be, the county should be out there maintaining, fixing these roads. And so there's a few different options. We're just not sure which one to go. Staff was, Chris, I don't know if you have any last departing words. Taylor, I know Taylor was there. So there's kind of this public works, you know, here's the road manual, here's what it says, here's land use coming in for subdivisions. How do we make sure that those are tied together in what the land use authority would like to see?
We had a challenge with trying to anticipate what will happen in the future, since none of it's set to happen with a guarantee. So while we can as kind of approximate that they would be out $180,000 for their portion, the county's still making a big assumption that we would have buy-in from the council to pursue eminent domain if needed on the McBride property. So that's assumption one. And assumption two would be, when is that going to occur? Is this a timing issue? Is this going to be pursued right now, 5 years, 10 years? What's the window? And so there are some unknowns. But if, like Matt said, we're already pursuing, we've already done some work on this and recognize there's an issue. So we know it's a higher priority, but there's not a set time. All those things together, I think those are the options. We had a lot of discussion about this, but
yeah, and you know, their development did create these issues, right? They're not creating these issues. These issues already exist. It just happens to be on their frontage. So they've been very willing to dedicate land, do certain things. You know, when they come in to access their property, their private road is right there at the top. You know, they're not adding more traffic down in the hazard areas. There's just a lot of these little parts, but so.
You estimated the ground at $2.50 a square foot, right?
Yes.
Who provided that estimate?
Engineer who's been kind of working on the initial alignment in their subdivision, so.
I don't even like hearing the word condemned property.
Yeah.
So, again, these are just.
If we do, then there has to be appraisers coming in and everything else, and so that's why I'm asking where that fact comes from, because when an appraiser comes in, highest and most effective use, so it could change dramatically.
You're correct, Nolan. These are just kind of a quick one-off, just so that we had something to say, because if you guys were saying, well, what are these improvements going to cost, and we didn't want to say $1 million or 100,000. We kind of wanted to give you a ballpark of earthwork, pavement, you know, generally.
$250 a square foot's pretty generous. I mean, that's 100,000, over 100,000 an acre.
Well, we've sat through some other appraisals right now that blow your mind.
Yep.
So,
And road improvements factor into that appraised value. Just want to mention too that with a subdivision plat approval and a fee in lieu, there would be dedication of that new road alignment from the property. And so that's a step towards, albeit one of many steps towards the future goal of this road being improved. And just like a trail, you work at it a piece at a time. A road can be similar.
I think, where does winter maintenance go or stop at that?
That's one of the reasons why the county started looking into this to start with the Baxters, because if you look where Angie's cursor is, we have to travel that because there's nowhere else to turn around.
Because that's a beast in the winter right there.
You're correct, and that's why the county was looking into it, trying to figure out what can we do, and had been in discussions with the Baxters, albeit very, very preliminary. We were in discussion with the Baxters on, hey, would you be willing to let us do this or that? And so, and that's kind of about the same time land was sold. We had got maybe an initial survey done, and so
Because on there, if you improve or widen that road, you've almost got to do a berm on the side to keep people from driving off the edge and everything else.
So, do you have or was that just Tim? Yeah, there was, the new proposed road, Nolan, would be wide enough with slopes, and it changes that whole alignment. I don't know, maybe Tim's,
If there's a drop off there,
First
so
picture
we're
that
talking.
showed the two different roads.
they would be filled up, yeah. So you would slope those so that there's no drop off. Are you talking going south?
South, yeah.
Yes, correct. There's actually development pressure to go south if we want to extend this conversation a little bit. There's a lot of pressure to come south, right? So as Tim was talking, we're getting a small piece here that's going to get improved. You know, the development has paid potentially what's their fair share. The next one comes, they got even a bigger hurdle to overcome to try to get rid of the steep dugway, and you know how they work that out. So again, these are coming every time we're getting a little further up the mountain, we're getting where the roads are a little worse, we're getting where our curves don't meet standards, and so it's trying to follow the code and so just wanted to get a discussion so that when this comes back to you, I mean, they submitted their application last September, so they've been waiting that long just for us to get through the subdivision process, so.
I'll give my comments, Matt, just on your three options. I think it's a little bit of all three. In my opinion, you know, there are times when we need to say, no, you know, this is not yet, it's beyond what we want to go. But on the other side of that, I think that, I think all of us benefit from county roads that have been built over the years, and the county's paid for those. I don't think all of the development cost needs to go on the developer. I think the county needs to own a certain portion of that, and especially when it's a major improvement of bridge or a realignment of roads, I think the county, that's just my opinion.
Development is, I mean, if you're putting, how many, they were trying to put three homes out there. There's nothing else close to it. I drive that twice a week in the summer. My cows are on just on the east of that or west of that. And that's a nasty corner, but it is pretty expensive to go up there and fix that. So I don't know.
Fair amount of traffic on it now.
Yeah, there is. Yeah, I mean, people use that as a shortcut for lots of things. I'm amazed how much traffic there is, but when you come around that with a gooseneck trailer, why, you better be looking out.
And hanging on, going down the other side.
Absolutely.
Other thoughts before we run out of time, commissioners?
Well, it's kind of something that, I don't know. I'd love to see him build out there, but there's got to be a financial limit too, to where a person could realistically afford. I just second what Jason said, but I almost wonder if we're a little premature.
So this fee in lieu, like anybody can choose to do that option, or is that at the city's discretion?
No, they have to meet a couple of conditions.
Okay.
One of the main reasons it was written for is for our pavement, right? So if they have to come and improve one of our gravel roads and they're the middle house between two, we can't make them pave the whole road. We can only make them pave the portion that's along their frontage, and we don't want gravel, pavement, gravel. So the fee in lieu was created, but the way that John drafted this, it just says where present conditions exist that make it unfeasible or impractical to install any required public improvements in a subdivision or a development. So in this case, it's not practical or feasible for them to go build the road on
somebody else's
property.
That's where my comment on imminent safety hazards, I think, should probably be included in that if there's an imminent danger, we can't do fee in lieu for that. Those types of things need to be fixed.
Yeah, and because I'm at a city also, I think it's much easier on a city you know, or in this case, the county, when you can share that with them. Because it just is so expensive to put these roads in, you know, our city can't afford it, I know the county can, so anytime you can share that cost and do it together is best, but when you throw that eminent domain in there, that's,
Makes it challenging.
oh, so uncomfortable.
We're very hesitant on something like that.
They are,
And this is going wide. This is so, we have a lot of issues as far as eminent domain, and we're being cautious on it. So that's, if you said you did this, but McBride's don't participate, then you're held up because of eminent domain, and I don't know where the council's gonna be on something like that.
And that may take a while, right? From a county, you know, I think that's the important part about this specific example, is that the county was already looking towards that, because we do need to do something. There is people that run off, there is crashes, there is maintenance issues. So,
You think the runoff comes from speed though, because everybody's like, this is wide open, I'm going.
I think so. We did a traffic count on the road. I know it's relative, and we said there's a lot of traffic, but we got about 200 cars a day.
What's our width right now on that?
The gravel portion gets a little narrow. The pavement portion is fine. It's just, and it's a straight road, so you do.
On McBride's, what's our width?
There's 20 plus by McBride's. So it's just whatever the county was doing back in the day, that's where they decided to stop. But McBride's have already come through the subdivision process. So.
30 seconds, just to kind of put a little more history on it.
In just a minute.
Yeah, that's fine.
so would you say this is on the county's like 5-year plan?
Yes. So, you know, if we go to the capital improvement plan, we start looking at money, we go to the McBride's, they don't want to sell, then, you know, again, where do we go? I'm in favor, you know, sooner or later, we got to get these improvements. It's just, you know, like Nolan says, it's a sensitive issue. No one likes to go there, so.
But this is a perfect example of why eminent domain exists.
Right.
Like you can't have.
Safety.
Yeah, well, one property owner holding up safety improvements for everybody else, like that's not reasonable.
And to be fair, no one has really, I don't think anyone from the county has reached out to talk to the McBrides, so again, we're at kind of a conceptual level. What are the impacts? How big of this, how much land are we gonna need? How much fill are we gonna need to actually get this road to where it's gonna meet standards, so.
Well, commissioners, our meeting expired, so we need to extend it again, or what would you like to do? Let me ask this, Tim, any of these discussion items can wait, or do we need to?
Defer to Chris.
Pressing.
We need to touch on floodplain. That will take 5 minutes. Not Tim's 5 minutes. But that'll take 5 minutes just so we can have that discussion, so it's in the back of your minds and we can address that, give some direction to staff as to what next steps might be there on floodplain. Cherry Peak Ski Area, that's just a touch base. Can that be delayed, or what's the status on that one?
Well, John has been waiting here forever.
Yes,
I couldn't hear.
You're okay, John.
I think it's just to update them, because we do have an application in, and then just the third-party review that's happening, so just a quick.
We're not gonna cover the review, we're just gonna say that it's occurring, correct?
Yeah.
Is that right, Matt?
Whatever you guys want to tell them.
All right.
I think it's important for them to know, and if they wanted to look at the draft copy or something, and if they had any, say, hey, well, I didn't see this, could we get this looked at as well, or just, however you guys want to handle it.
Just come into your office for an update?
But that's not been provided at present to the commission, so I'd say if that hasn't been provided, we should provide it and then address it at a different meeting.
So that's, like I said, that's up to you guys, we do have that, so.
Okay.
15 minutes?
It needs to be longer than that. We're 5 minutes into that 15 minutes, so.
Yes, you are. So you probably should go to a quarter after.
So 25 minutes?
Could we quickly pause for station identification?
Drink those bottles of water.
One and a half, and it's ready to come.
So maybe 30 minutes?
30 seconds.
Yes.
Sorry, I screwed it up for one time.
Well, let's
Phil's spot, by the way.
let's go ahead and have a motion to extend the meeting for 30 minutes, please.
Second.
Okay, motion and second to extend the meeting 30 minutes to 9:20. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, commissioners, take a couple minutes if you need it.
Are you ready to move on beyond Monticello, however you say it?
I don't think we've given any direction is the problem. So,
I really, I mean, I thought what you said was good, and all three of them, I think, have some benefits. There are times when it's gonna be, you know what, it's not a major deal. We can give a design exception on this. There are gonna be times when it's, no, this is, we're gonna have to build a bridge over a river or something like that, and it's just impossible to do that. So there are times when you have to say no. And then there's the in-between, which is everything else.
yeah, this seems like, perfect candidate for an in lieu fee. We got a landowner that's willing to make those investments for the frontage. They're not saying, heck no, we can't do it.
I just go back to the safety issue. If we have
Yeah.
identified,
Sure.
this is a dangerous intersection.
Right, but
And I don't know if we
according
call
to
it
this
dangerous, but
proposal, that access, is not coming from the dangerous section of road. It comes before the dangerous section of road. That's relevant to me, anyway.
Well, if there's too many cars a day now, and you fix that little corner a little bit, you're gonna raise
Get a lot more.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that coming off the other side, that steep side, it gets real
It's
pretty
watch-worthy,
fast.
That's actually a pretty convenient way to catch the canyon. You go that way and then up past 6,800.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Both ways
A lot
coming
of
in
people
and out
do
of
it.
Paradise and Avon.
A lot of people do it.
You know how she puts this up the plat?
Yeah, I just don't know.
I think in my head, if the access was south of the hazard, right, and the prevailing direction of traffic or something like that, I would lean more towards it's not ready. That's just my opinion. In other words, you have to come through the hazard to access the property. That's just my thinking. That would be more clear to me, to lean towards saying, hey, it's not ready, or development's not ready.
But you're thinking that it should be dealt with and probably shared cost.
I mentioned while you're away that this strikes me as an obvious project to meet the in lieu fee sort of criteria. So that's just my thoughts. So does the commission feel like we're leaning towards providing some direction, or is the response just depends? Case by case basis.
I think just hearing the discussion you guys are having is great for staff, so.
Okay.
Render a decision, just kind of knowing your thoughts and how to do that.
May I input two things here? You have the Nautica subdivision, which is very close to that. We've stopped further development because of safety, one egress and one ingress. We now studied the Hiram Dam Road. You were on that today, weren't you? We're going to be looking at costs there. We're also looking at, on the Nautica subdivision, which is above the hill of Hiram Dam, we only have one ingress, one egress. And so now they're saying, well, there's developers that are coming at us saying, we want to develop that, but we're saying, okay, that's a safety issue because of all of that. So then there's talking about another road coming across from Paradise side and up through there. So Chris is right on task as far as safety, but I don't, from sitting here and talking about budget and talking about roads, there's gonna have to be a point where we identify what is next. Well, I don't even know if that's gonna be met in 5 years, because when you start talking around Hiram Dam, when you start talking up at Nautica, when you start talking Trailhead that we talked about today, all of those issues. Follow me?
That's right. Other thoughts? Additional input for staff?
Hi, just on that Monticello, I guess, is it appropriate to approach McBride's and just say, what do you think?
I think that's the next step that needs to be done.
If in the back of their mind, they're saying someday we're gonna develop it, and somebody else is gonna pay for this improvement on the road, it raises the value of my ground. But if he's thinking, I don't want any more people driving past my property, then
I think as we talked about it as staff, it made it a lot easier to make a decision, depending upon what the McBrides said, but I don't know if their decision should, whether they are wanting to or they are not, should really change our, looking at this one specific one, so.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it might make it easier to say no, or it might make it easier to say yes. I still think generally what we should be applying the standards and setting the precedents without looking at whether they would or they wouldn't.
Now, I think where you guys were already looking at this section of road and then to have someone come in, I just feel like that's the ideal time to take advantage for me.
The applicant
Great.
still wanting to say something too.
Yeah, come on up.
Yeah, so I think in my mind.
You'll have to state your name, sorry.
Oh, sorry, Jacob Schillman.
For the record. On the
We plan
microphone.
on being a member of the county, so we want to do what's best in the best interest of the county as well. So.
Did you say your name again on the mic?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, Jacob Schellenberg. Sorry. So all of these, I think, are valid points you guys are bringing up. The safety issue, to kind of hit that, it's already a safety issue, and us getting 3 homes there isn't adding to it. We're turning in and out before it. So I don't think, I agree that there's going to be some that you want to take care of if there's a subdivision. But it's already been there for how many years? I don't know, 10 years plus. And so essentially all we're doing is we want to come and help pay for that road that happens 5, 8, 10, 12 years down the road. And essentially we're going to add less than 3% of the cars on that road, right? And they're not even going to go around the curve. We're going to be heading up into town. So I don't think adding the subdivision adds any risk or safety concerns. All it's doing is helping pay to fix it once you guys are ready. Everything else with the subdivision is good to go. It's all submitted. I mean, everything's there. The only reason we're creating 3 lots is we have to be able to pay for a home to live there. It's not like we're a big developer that wants to come make a ton of money on this. It's just we want to live there. So the McBrides are right there. I don't think, there's nothing irrational about this. We don't want to put 10, 12, 20 homes in. We're not trying to rezone it. And I think the pay in lieu of is perfect in this situation, like Chris said. It's allowing us to pay for a portion of road that can't be built yet, which helps you down the road. And even if you have other jobs that have to be done in 3 and 4 and 6 years, at least you're collecting our money to help you pay for this 10 years down the road. And we're not adding, again, 200 plus cars already have the safety hazard. We're not adding to it. We're just want to be here. Like, if you guys want to wait till this road, till you do it to approve this subdivision, you're not going to get our money and we're not going to be able to live here. So it's like a win-win to use what's already in place in your code to create the subdivision. So.
You recall how much property you dedicate to the right-of-way?
Yeah, so I think it's like an acre or so. So it's about the same or more that you would have to pay for the McBrides.
Right.
So it's, I mean, I personally, they don't even want to, so they have a power box. For me to come off that box, they needed to sign an easement because Rocky Mountain Power didn't do it. And he won't even sign a 10 by 10 easement to come out of that box. I have to create another box right in front of his box and come up. I don't think they're going to give you that land, so I can't get it. The only way you're going to get it to create a safe road there is eminent domain. And I can't do that creating a subdivision. So I think it's a perfect situation to use the code as it stands, get money from us, we build a subdivision, you guys can take care of the safety hazard when it makes sense for you guys. So anyway,
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you for those points. The other thing I would point out too is that, say there's additional subdivisions that are being contemplated further south here, they're not going to contribute to this, right? And there's no requirement that they do.
They would just, essentially the ones south of this have just been told no. Because they have dugways, they have other issues, again, there's some hurdles that are just too big to overcome. We feel like this one is kind of in that happy medium zone where fee in lieu of does, we're not creating like safety hazards, some of those things, so.
Okay.
The discussion has been great, we appreciate it.
You bet. Commission, I'm going to move on unless anybody else has something. Okay. Floodplain setback, 2 minutes.
I can do it. Yep, I do. Hurry, Andy, hurry.
We have a document on this one.
Yeah, we do.
10.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Okay. Thank you.
Whew.
Go, go, go.
So this should have been in your information, so you're aware of what's going on there. We ran into some interesting language in our code. We have a floodplain setback that exists in our supplemental standards under Title 1710. It states they have to be 100 feet from the edge of a identified FEMA floodplain. And I think my best knowledge of what that means, and I state it here, I'm sorry, let me add one more piece to that before I get ahead of myself. If they are within 100 feet of a floodplain setback, they also have to provide evidence that they have 1 foot of freeboard or 1 foot above the base flood elevation.
Yeah.
So that's what the current language states. There's some additional language, and most of the stuff you hear are just questions that haven't been formulated, so that's why it's just a discussion item. So what we bumped into is one example is when we have a FEMA floodplain in place that's Zone A, there is no established base flood elevation. So my best understanding of when they adopted this 100-foot floodplain setback was to reflect the inaccuracy, or maybe not, inaccuracy is a fair word, of what that floodplain boundary is. So what will often occur is someone will go in and do a more detailed hydrological study and say where that actual floodplain boundary is located. So in cases where that does occur, what purpose does a 100-foot floodplain setback then provide? And so that's the question that is generally being asked here is, one, is a setback required, or are there instances where a setback doesn't make sense and could be reduced? Or does the existing setback need to be increased? It's not, I'm not stipulating if it needs to go one way or another. We have someone who's trying to put a home in, they've done a hydrological study to some extent to show that the floodplain is much narrower, but they're still within the floodplain setback. So even, oh, go ahead, Chris.
I was just going to say, I mean, to me, the language doesn't say you have to, it's a required setback. It just says if you're within 100 feet of the floodplain, you just have to show a minimum of 1 foot of freeboard above the BFE. It doesn't say you can't build homes within 100 feet of a floodplain.
Correct. You can build there. You just
Right.
have to have.
You just have to show that you're have a foot of freeboard.
Correct.
Yeah.
So in the case
Okay.
where someone wants to put a basement in,
Yeah.
you can't.
Right.
Unless they can show
Or they could raise their,
that they're either put
Correct.
fill in or something different, right?
Correct.
There's some different approaches. So this question came up, and why I'm bringing it to you is are there circumstances where if we have precision with what the floodplain is and not just general approximations, which is most of our floodplain in the county is Zone A, Are there circumstances where it makes sense to reduce that floodplain buffer?
Yeah, I mean, as a person who works on this as part of my work, daily work or whatever, I mean, yeah, I've seen the FEMA and firm maps and had to work with those, and they can be very accurate sometimes, and they can be way off other times, and often the latter. But you know, site-specific analysis is pretty straightforward. It may not be cheap, but can really benefit, you know, defining exactly where that BFE is. And so that seems appropriate. In my opinion, that seems appropriate, like site-specific analysis. If you don't like what the FEMA firm map says, do a site-specific analysis to refute that.
That language, sorry, Chris, but that.
Go ahead.
In this same thing, that language doesn't say based on calculations, it just says based on the current firm maps.
Yeah, the language there isn't helpful. So we'd like some more detail as staff that kind of refines what that means and where the boundaries actually exist. That give us the ability to recognize if the real intent of that 100 feet is to provide protection to the structures and to the occupants, that makes sense. But if it no longer serves that purpose, then why are we applying it? And I don't know where that boundary is. There might be circumstances where contextually it makes sense to retain some sort of a buffer on what may pose a threat or a hazard based on flooding. And in other circumstances there may not. So I don't know what that looks like. All I'm proposing here is that there's some consideration of additional research that needs to be done, and if there are any additional questions or input from the commission before we pursue this as staff as a possible amendment to the county code.
Just jump in one more time. I would just add with Chris's knowledge that maybe changing the language from the FEMA to like 100-year floodplain, you know, some kind of a calculation, then you could maybe apply this to other streams, rivers, other places where you may have something that would pop up, and not just limit yourself to the floodplain. I would support that personally.
Yeah.
That would seem a lot better. We're down there where we get flooded some years because the river's full and perfect storm, and then for 5 years, nothing, not even close.
Yeah, if we base it on calculations, that has some benefit that identifies what's happening. And that would be a simple a simple process for us. Again, for the property owner whoever's developing the property, it may be a little bit intensive for time or cost. But from a process standpoint, it gives them the ability to say where the floodplain is without that restriction.
So from a construction standpoint, if a person takes out a loan on your home, if you're anywhere in or any of the property is in a floodplain, you're most likely going to have to buy flood insurance. The only way out of that is to hire a independent surveyor to come and shoot the grades.
And basically identify where the floodplain exists.
Exactly.
Right.
And a lot of times, more times than not, it's in the individual's favor to pay, they can pay 1 year's premium for what it costs to pay a surveyor to go survey it. And many times they'll get out of it.
I'm unaware of the fail rate, but every person we've worked with has typically been successful in amending that floodplain map.
Meaning the same results, showing that it's
showing that the floodplain was amended.
It was wrong.
And there's different routes to do that, and that, I think, knows more detail there, but if they're just looking at the insurance piece, they can get a LOMA, and they can get removed from the insurance requirement. If they're actually amending the map, it's a different process, and it's more cumbersome, more expensive, more time consuming.
But whatever you guys feels best, in my opinion, I just do it.
Are you looking to like drop the setback
Not entirely.
requirement, or go in a direction of if there's potential based on FEMA firm that you have a floodplain on your property, you need to do a site-specific analysis and determine where that boundary is.
I think that's appropriate. And then actually set up, like Matt had referenced, drop the reference to the FEMA firm and actually point to the calculation process or an appropriate process to identify where that floodplain is that's acceptable to the county. That's, I feel a better approach.
But what triggers knowledge that there may be floodplain in an area if it's not on a FEMA firm map?
We still have to reference the firm map somewhere, right? We have to have a start point. I agree.
I'm just trying to think, where does it come up on the county's radar that there's possible floodplain situation if it's not, kind of vicinity of a FEMA firm map?
Triggers investigation.
If it's present on the property, that usually, our current Title 17-18 lays out that process. It says there's an initial review that's kind of a map or desk review, and that's when it's flagged with the FEMA firm. But then what would change is we would adjust this language here to, instead of say it has to be based strictly on the firm map.
Right.
The other triggers already caught it. Now we're saying that if there's additional information based on this calculation, then that can be reduced or it can be eliminated, essentially.
And there's another part of the code that Chris is talking about that already says all your structures need to be set back 50 feet from that, top of bank and some of those things. So the county's already looking at that. So it's not something that we're not already looking at as our process. It might not be triggered as a FEMA one, but a lot of, there's starting to get more and more maps, and hopefully we'll get more of them where there has a study been come in. And so a lot of these are turning from something that's 200 feet wide to something that's 10 feet wide. But this would still make you, within 100 feet of this little 5-foot wide stream, have to go through and do a lot of information and submit more paperwork and take a lot more staff time when maybe it's not necessary.
Okay. Thank you. Anything else?
No.
Chris?
That was a fast 5 minutes. Did you feel like it was
Thoughts?
fast? I felt fast.
Other feedback for staff on this item? Commissioners? Okay.
I think that's good feedback, and I appreciate the consideration.
You bet. Cherry Peak. Who's taking that one?
Son of a gun. It's his turn.
Everyone keeps looking at me, so. As part of the Cherry Peak conditional use permit, they have asked for, to change the amount of attendance they can have from 1,000 to another number. And as part of that, we required them to do a traffic analysis parking study. I think what we wanted to report back is that the county has hired a third party to come in and review that. So they've done their initial review. There is a draft copy. How Chris wants to handle that draft copy, that's up to him. But I think that's we wanted to make sure that was discussed and known, correct, Chris?
Yep.
So.
Okay, so is this an item that's coming before us next meeting or sometime in the near?
We're anticipating? Are we deciding that? Is that what your hesitation indicates?
Could be. Have you got the analysis back?
Yeah, I think it's a matter of, I think the analysis may require that the parking analysis that they did is revamped or.
It's a draft, so if there's things that we, as a conditional use permit, if there's things that we want them to look at, if there's specific information that maybe they didn't request or we wanted a little more information so that we could actually apply those conditions, or when we take that back to the applicant. But that's just maybe an update, but again, how Chris's office wants to coordinate that back and forth. If it's internal, if they want to put that out for comments for you or to look at to see the draft, I can't speak to that.
I would suggest that we want most of that to be handled administratively, and it comes before us when staff's comfortable that all the questions have been answered that we're going to ask you if they're not already answered. But
I think that's a fair
excuse me.
approach. If that's the case, then there's no reason we can't review that as staff and pursue it at the August meeting.
What's the anticipated time frame
August.
for the August meeting? And then a decision will be made then?
Only if you want to. I'll keep saying that for Brady, but, yeah, very much up to you if you want to act on it at that point. You might get that information and feel like you need more discussion, and you can continue it. Or you could act, whichever you prefer.
I think it may also depend on the responsiveness of the other engineering group comments, or do you think it'll just be conditions of approval?
You guys can tell them as much as you want about the drafts.
I'm going to suggest we're not interested in the draft. I think it has to, you know, come from staff, already vetted. Like, we're not gonna.
Ready to act.
Yeah, I agree. If we want to avoid as many time and many opportunities or many situations where we would backload all the things as conditions rather than just ask for a fully complete process and application and idea. So I agree with that. What I'm stating is that, what's that?
Tentatively August.
Tentatively August. Our anticipation is that we'll be able to review that and that there will be a clear pattern. If there's not a clear thing to move it forward, it wouldn't be August, it would be September.
Okay. Sounds good to us. Are we able to pass on discussion item 12 for tonight? Anything critical there?
Tim?
Just say past 10.
This is specific to mineral extraction operations. Pass.
Okay, good enough.
I think we will, Tim.
So, before we adjourn, I'd just like to say how much I appreciate Chris and his years of service to the county and to the planning commission.
You talking about me?
Yeah. I'm not talking. No, I'm not one to pat my own back. No, thanks for helping guide us to making responsible decisions for all these years, Chris. I think we really appreciate it.
And keeping the meetings calm and in order and just.
Hey, you get flustered.
You don't know.
Well, you don't have to hold it.
Except when he said it was the airplane zone, not the actual zone.
Yeah, I mean, I think.
It's totally appropriate that this meeting went till 9:30.
That's right. His last hoorah. That's right. He's likely to get paid more and have less people yell at him in his next role. So
Any
fantastic.
announcements at this time? Are they going to have a third staff person? And
So what's happening with this transition as I
Yeah.
step out? So right now there will be an interim director that fills in, just kind of helping to keep things run. That will be our Chief Deputy Executive, Dirk Anderson, will just kind of pick up a few extra duties to kind of help with the maneuvering of that. Their hope is within the next 3 to 6 weeks, they'll have issued an offer and have someone in that position. I think that's a hopeful and optimistic approach. It may be a little longer than that, but I'm not directly involved in that. I just hear about those pieces. But I'm hopeful that sooner than later.
Thanks,
He's
Noah.
directly involved with those pieces.
Good.
Am I accurate with what I said?
Good.
Okay. And my hope is, and my staff's hope is, that there will be someone there sooner than later. There is good staff in that department, but I'll tell you right now, our planning and zoning is slammed, and we have been short-staffed. We just hired 2 new permit techs who look very promising, but typical timeline to get up to speed on zoning is about a year.
For sure.
So, and that's just for them to be able to start to feel like they can delve into some of these things and feel comfortable answering questions fully. Just a lot of pieces to pick up, but I'm very confident that they will be up to speed pretty quickly. So I'm hopeful in that sense.
Good.
So we're behind, that's all I'm saying on the planning and zoning. But we'll keep making progress.
Well, thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Angie, next month's agenda. Big.
It's going to be, it looks like, yeah, so we have the general plan, which Lauren talked about. We will have the public hearing again on the recreational facility changes, discussion on floodplain. We have 2 rezones, 2 CUPs, including our first cidery. slash winery. And possibly Monticello Meadows, possibly Cherry Peak.
Awesome. Sounds like another late night. So you can look forward to it, commissioners. Without objection, we'll stand adjourned.